are live once again with the sound working this time. Good thing you noticed that. It was only in a couple minutes. So welcome to Portal Mountain Development Meeting number 72.
Holy shit.
And yeah, that's a lot. As we were just mentioning, we kind of skipped the last one. It's nobody's fault. It's all cool. It just happens. Sometimes we skip, but we've been saving up, I guess, a lot of development talk.
Well, not just talk.
Regarding the dashboard.
Stuff's been done. That's kind of why there's
Development conversation, whether it be with a computer or with other people's.
Sorry. I don't mean to interrupt.
Yeah, so this is, of course, for those of you who, how could you be new here at number 72? But if you are, these are casual
Welcome.
meetings. We have our beers, we cheers, because we're here to enjoy ourselves and make some developments.
It's clearly not monetized.
It's not. This isn't a product for anybody. It's not meant to look good. Half the time we eat burritos or whatever, like while talking,
Actually.
with food spilling out, and so that happens. But yeah, it's just a casual meeting, and we're on number 72, and we've been for the last, say, 5 or 6 meetings really diving into this idea of the dashboard as a software package product which we can develop.
Yeah.
We can
an idea that's been
do
actually
something.
forming for years.
Yeah, right. Yeah, you'd say it's like a culmination of sorts of just all the talk of architecture and what is the guild and all this kind of stuff.
And the
gift
it's
economy
also,
versus market.
It's also the perfect storm of us having actually the tech to support the idea. Because before we were, at least as I was
suppose.
playing
Are you
around,
talking about AI as far as planning, or
No.
actual packages?
actual packages in the
They didn't
in
exist
the JavaScript
even
framework.
a couple years ago.
Right.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay, so
So
we're on the
there's
cutting
like-
edge, ladies and gents.
Yeah. So from the perspective of other devs, I look like a crazy fanboy of like all the different packages. Which
But there's a very good reason behind why we need these specific
Oh, yeah,
packages
I've-
with these specific functions.
I've been on the lookout for so long, and one of them is
And-
still under development and is still not quite there, and it's the only one I want to use. It's just
What's
the
that one
perfect
called?
one. It's the router. It's Tanstack router. Tanstack is an organization that does a lot of really cool data management stuff, which we're actually using one of their pieces of technology called Query. That's on the refined side. It's given to us for free, whatever. We're not dealing with it
Right.
directly. But
They're-
anyway,
they're already in the mix.
we're already utilizing it in one way. This particular software package would allow us to map URLs into a stateful request,
Yeah.
basically.
So you're talking about what's in the address bar of your web browser at the very top.
Yeah,
is
driving
meant
the data.
to, like, this is where you'll have a question mark usually at the end of your .html or whatever, and then a variable equals this, a comma or whatever, variable equals that.
Sure, but instead of
That
just
sort of
doing-
idea.
Instead of doing that, like you have a URL pattern and says, let's use a blog for a simple example. You have a bunch of posts, and then you have post / the ID number.
Yeah.
So that ID number is a piece of data, and so the URL now has a connection to
Yeah.
a particular.
It's like maybe
post.
it's like the key for that database.
Right. So it's combining the information coming in from the URL, the request headers, and all of that kind of stuff, and saying, oh, it means this resource. Right. It means this piece of data here. Make sure it's connected to this query over there in the database. Make sure it's connected to that
Yeah.
logic over here and the logic layer. It
It
has all of
seems
that
like
information.
it seems like you would have to summarize, and not to get into too many details right away because we're still on the introduction, but
Yeah.
it seems like you would have to have like checkpoints or summarizations of state to link to, because how could you specify the entire state in a URL? So
Right. So
it seems to me like
when you pull up when you pull up post ID number X, right? You're pulling it up as an authenticated user Y. You're pulling it up with permissions A, B, C,
Yeah.
already integrated into the whole request cycle. So it's kind of like keeping the URL basically now gives you a key into a representation inside your application, right? It's a mapping. That's the data piece that it carries with it, what it maps to.
Right, but this is what was the name of that package?
For the router.
TAN router.
TAN
So this is a
stack.
specific TAN stack like key value that kind of lets you into that.
There's
state.
React router, which is a different package. There's TAN stack router, which is the one I'm waiting on.
But it lets you access a state which is more complicated than just the key itself. The key is representing a state. Is there something?
So the router will have what's called a loader function attached to it. The loader function is responsible for mapping everything in the URL to the pieces of data that you're going to have to interact with.
Uh-huh. Okay.
So that's what the router does. It's that mapping. It says if I get this URL, I'm going to parse it. These are going to be all of the parameters I'm going to extract from that URL. I'm going to use these parameters to query my loader. The loader is going to be responsible for attaching data to the URL based on those parameters. And the whole thing is now synced up. So it's the route that drives what data is presented to you back.
Yeah, I guess it's
the route is what encodes.
I don't know enough about how it all works
So
at this point.
So
to make
posts is a resource, right?
Super
Comments is another resource.
understanding.
So the posts URL maps to the list of all the posts. The comments URL maps to the list of all the comments. See how that URL carries data to the system to tell it what the query is? It's all ingrained into the request. Everything is all state is represented in that request. So that means it's a REST.
Okay, well I get it at like a high level,
it's
but
a REST protocol. RESTful resources, if you know what I'm talking about. Anyway, for the sake of simplicity,
setting up here, continuing to set up.
for the sake of simplicity, it's a way to map URL patterns to the data in your application or the happenings of your application. It's the thing that informs your application of what you want to do. So if you want to add a message, you're going to go to a URL to which you can add messages.
Why is that heart here? How do I get rid of it?
On the flip side, imagine trying to add message to a profile. What would that URL look like? Weird, right? It'll error. So yeah, so there's information carried in the URL, and that information is representative of what needs to be done.
Right. Yeah.
This is a concept called
So instead of
representational
simply
state transfer.
accessing, oh, I want that page, just give me that page, you're sending actual variables or whatever along with that request and in the URL bar.
Yeah, and those
saying-
variables could be between the slashes too. So
Yeah,
if
as folders.
because if you have a
dynamic
URL
folders.
yeah, you can have a URL pattern, and in the pattern it says it starts with this fixed text, but then it has a variability over here, like it could be
Like
the ID.
it could be like conversation / message / one or something. It could be the first.
Right.
Return the first message.
And that
of
one,
the conversation.
that one is definitely a mapping in something into a deeper data set. So it's not just like a static page.
This is the page called 1.html.
Mm-hmm.
Great. Okay. Yeah. Okay. That's good. So we've been putting together this whole stack or suite
software,
of
yeah.
softwares which work together to facilitate the dashboard and to work in a way that nature works. That's kind of
That's the real constraint, yeah.
a recurring theme. Yeah, so I've been kind of going after this type of a system for a long time, for many years. Just this idea that, and protocols have been something that I always intuitively understood, like the purpose of a protocol, like why should we all have a sort of understanding of what's the best way to do this or what's the best way to do that or the best way to do that. And
It reminds me of geotabs.
then we generally, flock to those best ways. But again, the caveat, which I think I mentioned it before we restarted, was that even though you have protocols that are sort of somehow agreed upon to be the best, it's sort of a popularity contest in a way. And we should always be open to the fact that something better could come along.
Not only better, but parallel. Parallel in the same quality. Because the problem we have encountered with the idea of, say, geotabs is that if you have an ontology...
That was a long time ago.
Yeah. And Jeb killed that idea basically at its root. Because what we were going for back then was, what is the ontology, right? Which is the same perspective of like trying to find the one true reality or any of those kinds of things.
Right. It's like if we could all just have the same vision, then we can share in data and updates, and it would all be known, and everything is working.
But Jeb threw that idea completely out the window, right? Because Jeb presented the concept, pointed back to a very clever mathematician, Gödel, who basically talked about what representation really entails. And the conclusion that he reached is that whenever you have an ontology, it'll either end up being incomplete in itself or contradictory to itself. And you don't have an option to go either way. Like, you can't have both. Completeness and non-contradictory situation.
Because everything is connected to everything else in some way.
You see how that
to the outside world. There's always an outside world that's not so perfect as the inside.
And that's why the idea of geotabs got essentially tossed out the window as soon as that realization was made. I mean, not directly, but it became something like, once we started thinking back on it, it was like, no, we can't do that. We really just couldn't.
Well, yeah, with the paradigm, but at this point, what we wanted to do with geotabs
similar
can be done through this type of thing. There just has to be a deeper understanding, I guess,
of the limits of ontologies themselves.
Yeah, and how to work with that, how to be dynamic.
Right. So instead of having one overarching ontology, we're given space for any number of ontologies to be your actual capacity for truth in the moment. What's true to the moment.
Right. Yeah. And everything gets updated over time because nothing is ever static. So whether we like it or not, understandings change, cultures change, and things have to be adaptable. If they're not, then they become a relic.
Well, even in particle physics, the only way to know that something was there in the static sense is by changing it and and shifting the situation entirely into a very different configuration. Like you read if a particle is there by bombarding it with other particles and changing it, right? So even the knowledge of any static frame requires a change in that frame entirely, so it cannot stay static.
Right.
That's what I'm talking about, really.
Yeah, so we have to kind of throw out naive notions.
Of permanence.
Yep.
And impermanence. Because impermanence could be grasped naively as well.
Sure.
Okay. Caution.
Wait.
Loud noise.
Wait. Good job. Beer opened.
So yeah.
It's been a long time coming. And
So I've
so
laid
we
out-
need to catch up on the last, I guess, month or so of developments.
What I've been doing in my cave.
And
I've reached some milestones. Yeah.
not a cave. Like we have got a dashboard developer chat going, and there's some back and forth there. I haven't caught up with it. Just
Well,
bandwidth.
you have with the gist of that's what I've been laying.
I
in.
know that I already kind of get.
I laid
understand.
into you for that reason.
It's just specifics. So I think today, like, it'd be nice if we could go over what is the dashboard, big picture, what is it solving, kind of stuff, and then how are these packages coming together to give us that in
Mhm.
this way that of acknowledging, like you said, impermanence and all that, and change, updatability, and this is like the guild. The idea of the guild is never kind of like a static thing. It's say you have a gardener's guild full of newbies. Well, that guild is going to drastically change over time as people gain experience, right? And that's can be described in the protocols that they're using, whether it's actually articulated or not, right?
Well,
people keep protocols to themselves and just say, or think, well, that they get it, okay, it rubs off on each other.
You can't really have a true protocol without articulation. What you can, however, have is implicit and explicit protocols, but they have to be articulated in some sense, either directly or indirectly.
I think that's what I meant. Yeah.
Okay.
Just pointing at the ways that people can keep things to themselves, and it's like you just notice that others are doing the same.
And you copy it, and that's already a protocol done.
Right.
Transmitted.
Mm-hmm.
Observation is another key component in our thinking.
Right.
So yeah, basically the past month, as it were, has been heavily.
There's been lots of finding of packages. It
Yeah,
seems
like the bare bones.
what is the actual stack
necessities.
gonna look like? Because we don't want to reinvent the wheel,
Uh,
and we have to assume at this point that there are developers out there with a similar vision that are just trying to do their little piece. So let's work together. That's kind of the idea, right?
Or not even that. Like the packages that I'm selecting for example, like all of the caching stuff, right? Like there are developers out there who know how to deal with caching data.
Nice preview.
Yeah. Who know how to deal with cache data, right? Like, it's a hard problem to solve technologically. It doesn't matter what the setup is, like whether it's for dashboard, whether it's for any other software. It's the same problem, right? It's just how browsers deal with data, how servers deal with data. So, a lot of what we don't want to do is solve the technical problems that were solved already.
Yeah, exactly.
So
Ditch
even if they
work.
don't have anything to do with dashboard, it's fair game.
Right. Yeah, there's not necessarily the same vision, but there's definitely insights must have been happening to drive the developments of those.
Yeah. Their brilliant niches haven't been collectively united in this way before. Right? Taking all of their small contributions and putting together one package that runs through all of them in a way that actually is conforming to what we are thinking as well.
Mm.
So it's utilizing everything they have to its maximum potential while giving us exactly what we want,
Sure.
without their knowledge of the fact that they have contributed to such a coherent system.
Mm-hmm. Right. It reminds me of the process of emergence, where you you just get these little bits and pieces kind of floating up,
Yeah.
becoming concrete, but then boom, you got another layer that just sucks all these things into like a piece,
And it needs
that works
and it
together.
needs a threshold, right? Like it has to have all of those
Yeah,
pieces available
you can't
to
be
it
missing.
beforehand.
Nothing can be missing.
And those can be developed on their own for whatever reasons that they got developed for.
Right.
It's exactly
Reasons
exactly
of
what emergence
coherence.
is.
Mhm.
It's we're drivers of an emergent phenomenon at the moment, like by putting those pieces together like that. If we succeed.
Mm-hmm. Yep. So that's the idea. That's the point. Would be to succeed, to create a product, if you will. Out of the last how many years we've been discussing this
Create a product.
technology.
Go over the threshold. Tomato.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Right. The
We want
minimum threshold.
Want to step away from the marketing language, but still be marketing language at the same time. Instead of have our brand, if you will, to the market is like instead of having an MVP, we'll have an MT.
Most viable product.
Minimum
Minimum viable product.
versus
So the minimal amount of work needed to be done to create something that can be
Used.
sold on the market, basically.
versus crossing a minimal threshold. which is
Threshold
what
of
MT.
usability or...
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
It is kind of a selling point in its own right, from the perspective of the market. Like from the market's perspective, nothing changes. It just looks at it and goes, "Oh, so it's a product you can sell." So it doesn't see a difference between the two terms.
Sure. Yeah, we always have our own terms for things, it seems, which is fine at this point because there's
that's
so
our
many,
brand.
so many of them that they all support each other and legitimize each other, right?
That's the idea.
Yep.
So, want to start an interview?
I thought we started already. Oh, shit. Where's my notes?
So you want to do the tech stack or the main overall picture again, or
Let me just introduce by, I guess, what I've wanted to get out of this for a long time
mm-hmm.
was to be able to have a system where, like a technological system, something you log into your phone or computer or whatever, to help you to organize with other people to cooperate in behavior, basically. A long time ago, I thought, and this is one thing that it can do, it's maybe not the whole scope, but this is my...
One point.
What?
Self and others. So organize self-behavior.
No, did I just say with others? Organize with others?
So you
Yeah, organize
you
yourself
skip
and
the
others. So that would be a typical kind of
That's all I wanted
point to make, which is good. That we don't just change the world; we change ourselves.
Yeah, it's a.
Right? There's
you're part of.
There's
You're
a
part
continuum
of the,
going
you're part
on
of the
there,
whole.
right? So I've many years ago went through my own kind of processes and saw the kind of the banking system and like the way that governments are run, divorced from the people and all this kind of stuff.
Coercion.
And I thought the people, average person doesn't have a way to just connect with others directly. We have to be mediated through this giant, crazy stack where you pay each end up paying each other into this bank account or that bank account, and basically the idea of a family is not extended out into the world, like a true family. Let's say a good,
Extended family.
Yeah,
Like literally the word you just
like,
used.
I know families are often traumatized and completely broken, but the ideal of a family where you can two people can love each other and have a child or whatever, and then whatever the child demands is kind of given for, because every person has
I have to interject
a number of people
bit.
Can love each other, and then
it's not about polyamory. I'm talking about like what could constitute a family does not necessitate any kind of biological reproduction.
So I'm talking like traditionally
we could be traditionally
historically. traditionally.
So historically, traditionally, again, sorry, I apologize for this, but historical traditional
With
families
recent history tradition.
are all about property,
Yeah.
contract,
Yeah.
property.
Now we're opening a can of worms
what do you call
here,
it?
which is fine.
Property transference contracts.
But you're right.
That's the problem with calling anything
So let's
traditional.
go, when talking about the family, let's just say, like, let's go back to
tribe.
the pre-civ
Yeah,
tribe
yeah.
idea where,
I use the tribe usually for
because it's not just the nuclear family in their hut, which they've have a mortgage on their hut, and,
this. Yeah,
and
yeah.
it's like
Imagine them
all
having
this
a
kind
mortgage
of
on
stuff,
that.
right? So yeah, totally valid what you're saying there to say that this is the idea of the family in the tribal sort of sense, in the prehistory sense.
I do apologize for the interjections. The only reason I did that is because the words being used have those connotations.
It helps as long as we can kind of roll with it.
Yeah.
So the prehistory idea of family, let's say, where and we're talking also about the gift economy, basically. That's how we've kind of described it in a whole package.
That is what holds a tribe together, the family together, all of these extended guild-like situations.
So
it is the gift economy.
Instead of each to fend for themselves and to become valuable to the market, to exchange goods and all that, the baseline is that each of us has demands. Those demands are expressed. Once a demand is expressed, then it can be satisfied. It can be supplied, right? So that's the basic dynamic. That's the basic economy, and this is the type of economy that I want to extend into modern society, whatever you want to call it.
Right. With that being a catalyst,
it's chopped
of doing it.
Right now, it's chopped off.
Oh no, it's not chopped off. It's vilified.
At a certain age, yeah.
It's vilified to be to.
Right. It's the typical, like, you're kicked out of the house at 18, whatever. Go get a job, fend for yourself, etc. And now, not every family is like that, and there's a whole gray area, and there's lots of really loving people and parents, and who really, they shouldn't, according to the market. There's no reason. Why the hell would you keep supporting that person? They just keep demanding. They just keep having needs. Why would you support that, right? Like, this kind of mentality.
Yeah. Like, what have they done to earn their existence?
Yeah, right. So there's there's two different sides, and actually the market and our modern civilization emerged from this sort of idea, what we're talking about now, and what we're talking about never went away. If it ever went away, boom, everything is gone and dead. All society is nothing. There's nothing left.
Well, it's just drones, just animated corpses.
But this is maybe a stretch, but I don't think
that's the Buddhist metaphor.
I don't think that any sort of community can exist on a pure market.
Well, that is the Buddhist sentiment, essentially. When it points that out, like how humanity is trying to be transactional in that sense, the picture it paints is that what you have as a result is a bunch of animated corpses.
Right.
The system is alive, but the
being pushed into action.
Any one of the layers that could go above that system is just dead.
Yeah. So, and a lot of people have this type of intuition, especially nowadays. Let's say in the modern climate, modern media climate, whatever. People are being exposed to the extremes of just depravity that we're put through, and they naturally think, well, there's got to be another way. It can't just be this machine-like robot pushing corpses through, and that's all of existence.
Maybe one more wrench. Sorry. It's not that. It's different now. It's faster now. Like the same same depravity existed back then. It just it was paced a little slower than it is today.
You're right. What I meant by the media environment is the fact that we see all the details. If you're looking for it, they can come to you. If you get an intuition and then start searching for it, you'll get a flood via the internet of imagery and all this
I
kind
think
of
this
stuff.
ties into the concept of accelerationism, is that as time moves on, the consequences of the pace become even more fastly apparent. Everything turns faster. Everything. That's why I'm saying accelerationism, because everything seems to.
This is kind of the false acceleration.
Every time it rebounds, it goes faster
the
into
idea,
the wrong direction.
the idea of simply pushing that faster, like intentionally, as if that's going to fix things, so that it collapses faster. That's the false accelerationism.
Right. No, I'm not talking about that.
The true
I'm talking about-
accelerationism is to bring in this idea, like we're talking about, with the prehistory idea of family, and extending that out into society.
I think I'm talking more about like a phenomena rather than a concept, in which the more you
Somebody here.
the more you double down on a concept.
Eon. Good day, gentle sir.
Hello. The more you double down on something, the faster the wrong result comes down. The more you want to double down on that, the faster the false result comes up again.
Right.
And that's accelerating.
Yeah, so you're talking, that's like a positive feedback loop.
Right.
In a way. It
Right.
just feels good. Oh, I was right.
So not acceleration.
I was right. I kicked something further and it went even worse. Imagine that. Beautiful.
And my toe is more broken.
Keep doing it. Yeah.
I'll be right back.
Yep. So break one, and let's see. Eon is just stating that you have a need in this current economy. Just stating that you have a need in this current economy is portrayed as a sign of weakness and repulsion.
Okay.
You're a leech and a parasite. Right.
I'll add something to that, because
That's what you were just saying that.
So not only that, that
as articulate.
is true when you are poor, because if you express a need into the system when you have wealth, the system responds in the opposite direction.
Right. True.
That's actually a key distinction between presenting a need to the system from a perspective of from the position of actual need, and a frivolous one.
Frivolous, but with money. So we shall be right back. Apologies for break one. Sorry, not sorry, etc. And we'll be right back. Okay, submitting form, yep. And we're semi-back.
Yeah. When you submit a form on the internet, you have a URL you're submitting to, all the data you're submitting, right? So basically what it says in that entire configuration is that this is what's going to happen. All of the information that about the event that's about to transpire is found in the entire URL structure.
Yeah.
That's what I'm talking about when I'm saying the URL carries the information. So you're looking at what happens to that URL, and you're like, oh, a message is going to be added to a conversation.
But is the message itself in the URL?
It's in the request. It could be in the URL too. Getting information, like querying databases, all of the information about your query is found in the URL. When you're posting information, saving information, URL plus that information. Right? So the URL itself carries everything you need to know about what the activity that's going to happen.
Mm-hmm.
That's why you have a mapping in your application between URLs and resources. That mapping allows the URL to carry all of that information forward and backwards.
It's infused.
So yeah, anyway. It's a small detail, but this is what routers do. They're mapping the HTTP structure to your data structure.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Coolidge. So that means your URLs are actually significant. You can't just have a willy-nilly pattern and just decide on that. You got to be very careful about your what are you conveying?
Great.
What is it with?
I don't know.
That tastes weird. It's menthol
I know. No, is it? No, I don't think so.
or licorice.
Yeah, maybe there's like the licoricey, but those can be like terpenes too.
I don't know what that is.
Terpenes are the things that make it taste like different flowers or whatever.
Oh,
Where did I put that other ashtray?
you done with it?
No, but
For now.
at some point. Oh, there it is.
So, would you like to talk about the 3 nervous systems?
No. Eventually, yes. Eventually, yes, but right now, no, because I only just got started into
Go ahead.
some things.
Go ahead. I'm at your command.
Yeah, right. For the next 3 seconds.
So.
So the nervous systems. Yeah. So I was just saying, like, the purpose or point for me, for why I've been endeavoring after this particular software product,
Yeah, I'm with you. Man.
is a way of connecting community together to work
Community and
self.
Sorry, I just had to.
Yeah, that's the last tangent. Yeah,
People do forget that part.
they're good. It's hard. Yeah, it's can be tough to give these types of conversations good justice because of the tangent ability. Turn comments back on. Clouds of smoke. Yes, they are billowing.
Definitely. You can guess as to the reasons as to why.
So, let's say an app that you could have on your phone or whatever, I use it on your computer for helping you to map organization of the self and community.
Mm-hmm.
And when you can do that, this was like, I've had this kind of insight many years ago, was that would be something like, I was thinking, if only we could all just agree on like how to work together.
Yeah, the geotabs idea.
And then just keep improving that. If only there was a way, but
Like the one source of truth idea.
yeah, like when you say geotabs, I come back usually to the memory of like the earthquake
That's
scenario.
That's what we did. That's what we used to.
Where it's like, well, everybody knows what an earthquake is, anyways. If you had a social media site like certain ones that exist where you can just give update posts, right?
On the
But
maps on the geography, yeah.
somehow have it like auto collate or whatever, like auto come together,
aggregate,
like
yeah.
auto aggregate based on the metadata of what it is that you're doing. So like a bunch of people can post with the word earthquake, right? And you can do this in a very crude way with existing things. Like it's literally just if the word earthquake is in the message, you can try search for that. Maybe if you're lucky, a couple other terms. But like this software should be able to like automatically even alert the user just based on what the user is sensing on the network within its own logic. Be like, okay, for some reason like the word earthquake just came up when it never does almost, and like a whole bunch of like say 3 or 4 of your friends and like a whole bunch of your acquaintances and like thousands of people you don't know, just suddenly this term came up, or this
I think
one.
this is the
so you
current,
get an alert.
This is the current way that social networks actually do work. So your idea is not like actually bad. It's just crude. Not your idea, our idea, because
This was a long time ago.
It wasn't a blame game thing going on here.
Geotabs was like completely my initial kind of design, as far as like I made a bunch of program windows of like it should look like this and that and that, and it should have this and that ability, and maybe just the scenario is crude.
No. The crudeness isn't that. It's our later analysis that pointed to why it's crude, and that's Jeb.
Oh yeah. So we already brought this up earlier in this this meeting.
So we had a flip on what ontologies entail.
Yeah. So you're just trying to advance the conversation towards that.
Why it didn't work out that way.
Right, and this is like sentient machine level stuff.
Essentially, yeah.
The knowledge of the ability that you do have to actually take care of different domain and languages being used, and it's like everyone can have their own. And
right, moving from synthetic neurological computation into sentience, actual feedback. Incorporating the fact that there are multiple domains and then there's translations between domains doesn't invalidate the domains. It's just a different representation scheme.
Yeah. So back to the geotabs thing. I guess at that time I wasn't thinking that was actually what the issue is. All I was thinking is, I know that like there's got to be a better system where information flows more like automatically, and in disaster situations or like situations where there's danger, like
I find this really fascinating because your particular solution to that, like your way of thinking, is exactly what's been tried over and over and over and over and over with all of these.
What was my solution at the time?
To use metadata to like sort of try to negotiate a
it's just that obviously you're looking at metadata. That's what you do have. It's what do you do with that, right?
Yeah.
So again, my only intuition is that I know this information is there, that we can use it smart, and it can do crazy things. Why isn't it happening right now the way it should? I don't know yet. But this is what
mostly because the way it's going to be used is going to have to make money.
And I mean, at the time, like I didn't know that it had to go meta.
Okay.
In a sense.
Okay.
Meta had to go meta.
That's a fair conclusion.
So this is a process that goes forward. It's not that it was wrong back then or crude or whatever.
Yeah, it was missing a huge.
But it's the question found the answer.
it was missing a huge unknown, right? And like we did not know about when this idea came forward. We did not know about the fallibility of representation itself,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like we did not know that,
Yeah.
that it was going
That's
to
a
go
that's a
into
good way to say it, right?
into a realm of being either not
And in
full or just talking shit about itself in a
Yeah.
way that doesn't make sense. We
Right.
didn't know that. We didn't know that that was the natural conclusion of what
Right.
representations
Yeah, yeah.
are.
And it has to be contradictory, um, which can be fine if it gets reinterpreted. Just know that there's a boundary that you're going over
I don't think at
between
the
one domain or another.
I don't think at the time we were working with any kind of like layering stacks. I don't think at the time we had that notion of the incompleteness principle. And
We would have just been getting into like the hold-on idea, I think. Like that's where it kind of
no,
started.
before that, it was pre hold on. It was way before I had any Buddhist
Yeah,
inclinations.
yeah. If you're talking about geotabs, like that there is, I think, definitely a gap.
Yeah, it's a
Um,
huge gap, but it was a useful one.
Right.
Like
It's a representation of where I was trying to go. Right.
Then.
When that's kind of, I brought that to you from like my work with Anders.
Oh,
that we were
you're already
thinking-
with him, okay? Working with him.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, that would have represented the kind of first, we both kind of decided, I guess, like subconsciously or whatever, that we got a great understanding, but we need to branch out into our own endeavors with what that looks like. And he took a more concrete route, which is to make prototypes, make something that works, just keep having something works. It's
Yeah.
like the
And I chose my usual path of wait and
it's like
wait
agile.
and wait. And I chose my usual path of wait and wait and wait until I see something that I can explode into, which is what we're seeing actually right now. Once the text.
What are we talking about right now? That's what
How
you
the
had
idea
asked.
evolved for each of us individually.
No, yeah, right, yeah. So this is kind of like historical
Because I've
stuff
been
a
like
bit.
playing with Rails for so long.
What we're talking about is I wanted to just introduce a context for why even did we create this program? Where did it originally come from?
Yeah, yeah.
So that's we've been trying to paint that, and we keep taking side channels, which are actually main channels, but Jenya gets triggered easily.
No,
No,
I,
I'm kidding.
I thought I was doing good.
No, it is. I'm just ribbing you, buddy.
I don't take ribbons too well. I take them seriously.
Apologies.
Well, I'm actually trying, so it's just
yeah, so
kind of plays into that.
And the idea from there would be like, why did we do this application, and then
Well,
what is this application?
So if I may,
How does this solve what we were
stepped
thinking
back.
about, right?
We stepped back like miles away from that goal.
Yeah.
Created a whole model in the meantime, and now we're sort of tripping on the edge of like that recurring
Being able
thought.
to recuperate the past like that.
Yeah, and then like feed all of this other information that we've gotten
Yeah, there's so
from
much.
development.
That's the kind of crazy part. Like once you reach this, let's call it a minimum threshold, you can go back in your history and reprocess it all through the new language, right?
Yeah, because that's what I think what happened is that that idea was being kept alive in one format or another. The latest one of them being Dashboard. AO also played a role into like what is going to happen. The isomorphism,
And-
all of this isomorphism discussion stuff. Like when I'm talking about like it can run on the server, it can run on the client, it can run this, it can run that.
Yeah.
That came from like that work, trying to get AO isomorphic.
That was a constraint that we definitely had understood for what would make the autonomous organization software. Has been kind of Andrew's.
Yeah, and since I've tackled that project and failed miserably, I've been on the hunt for
a major
for the
idea.
stack of our technologies.
A major idea with that or constraint is media, and your media needs to be at any point you can just take the whole thing with you, No one can ever take it away from you, no matter what system you're out using.
Mm-hmm.
Another big idea is, I guess, accessibility and simplicity of use, which is why we would talk about index cards.
Yeah.
For like the longest time, like this is a card, that's a card.
This
This protocol is a card, that's a card.
This is a good starting point for discussing some of the choices behind the tech stack that I've come up with since that confrontation.
Right. Yeah. So
like PouchDB, for example, is like the connecting point.
So let's notate. We can notate
PouchDB.
like some technologies that we're using right now.
So your concern, the concern you just raised,
And reasonings.
You should be able to take all of your data and just like keep it or do whatever with it, right? How does PouchDB solve that problem?
Well, we can see that.
Well, on the first hand, PouchDB becomes a local database instance. I'm just gonna run through the idea. It becomes a local
Sure.
database instance. Unless it's configured to say sync with some other source in any way, all of that data is retained within that instance. There is no
Yeah. So
there's no
yeah, you're talking about like a localization, locality, local ability. In other words, and that's great. Keep that in mind. This is right where we would go. The idea of a deck of cards, that's your database. You can take it with you. You can put it in your pocket. Nobody can stop you from having that.
Yeah, take this local instance,
So
extract data from it,
you're
convert
right
it
that
to your cards.
I think we're in a good position, a good starting point to kind of walk through the actual tech stack,
Mm-hmm.
but we haven't completed the
Abstracting.
painting the picture of what is a people with index cards. What does that look like?
That's the broadcast.
In a physical sense. Let's say
Like
you
a-
have a room with people in it and cards, but you have another room over there, and there's another table with cards, and
That's where metaphors like
I know, but we
conversation-
haven't conveyed it to
No,
the
we
to the
have.
our loving
We have.
our loving listeners.
we have in many different
Although I know
instances.
I'm sure Eon gets that kind of stuff, but I'm
So-
just, you see what I'm trying to do, create a flow of
Yeah.
conversation. We have to set up that scenario. The scenario is card boxes, cards, protocols, pen and paper, multiple tables, multiple rooms, multiple people.
How do you
This is our
organize this?
ontology. No, first you have to even say what it is. We haven't even spoken it yet, right? This is the system we are trying to replicate into a different media and higher scales, because that has to be able to come back down to this, which is what do you call it? Facilitation. This is facilitation using local physical media. It has to come down to that. See what I'm saying? Okay.
I do see
All
what
right,
you're saying.
I got that in. Now go.
The card system that you're describing
Yep.
is categorized in any capacity. Like, there's no association for when you put a card of this type into the system, this happens through the system. Like, the system does not know how to respond to it. So it's a bare bones way to tack on more and more data
Potentially,
into
yeah.
the set. So
You have to start with the very
so-
basic protocols. Yes.
so pretend you're looking at a database. In the database you have a table. The table is called cards, and all you're literally doing is this card was inserted, this card was inserted, this card was inserted, this card was
You're
inserted.
have a log.
Well, that's all it
This
is.
is you're describing you're
Okay,
iterating a conversation.
this card is edited, so the database row gets updated. Like, literally, it's a way to input data without any reactivity to the input. That's what the card layout does. Now,
I don't know what you mean.
The dashboard layout. What
What you said. What reactivity? What do you
reactivity means like you enter.
Are you talking about functional programming
Yeah,
again?
like no, I'm talking
Like
about.
when you have
I'm
a
talking
set
about
input, it's a set output, and there's
so
no crazy
a
stuff.
card added is an event.
Yeah.
Right now, in AO terminology, all that happens is that the card gets added into
Okay.
the database.
Now,
A row gets added into
I
the
think
database.
it would be neat for sure to go straight into the abstract, but also we could describe what would be physical facilitation in an actual conference with actual people and actual cards.
Let me get to it.
Because that would give the scenario where people would be like,
So-
okay, I know what problem we're solving now. But now they don't.
I'm trying to paint a picture.
We're just kind
and
of
I'm
like
not finished.
into abstract programming stuff.
I'm just trying to paint a picture. I'm
Okay.
just not finished.
We both have our sides, so I guess. So
It's not about sides at this point. I'm just trying to like
this
demonstrate
of this discussion.
So with the cards, you put a card in. There it sits. You've added a row to a database. That's literally the end of the interaction with that system.
Well,
So-
it does not at the end. You just added it to the pile. It's a pile, not
Right.
a list.
So what I'm saying, and in the dashboard, when you add a new row to a table like that, there's going to be a whole bunch of things that are listening in on this
Yeah.
and are going to be like, oh, this means that. Do more functionality. Respond to it. That's what I mean by reactive.
This is true in a physical sense using cards as well.
Right, which is missing from the AO system right now. That aspect of it.
Yeah.
The dashboard gives at least two very clear protocols to what to do with a
Even the
message.
fact of protocols isn't a part of it.
So you can only add conversations. You can only add messages as cards, right? Broadcast engine comes into play. You can add posts as cards. You can see every message can be a card. Every conversation can be a card.
Yeah.
Everything can be a card. But now we have structure and
Yeah.
schemas and
So-
all of that kind of reactivity.
Can I
happening.
interject for 1 second? We learn a lot from programming this, which can then be lessons learned, if you will, on the physical facilitation with physical index cards.
Mhm.
Like you would have certain index cards that are maybe a log card for something that just says this was added, that was added. Like when you're iterating, that's another card right there, a log card.
Yep. So think about messages in the conversation as cards in AO. Think about posts and comments in the broadcast engine.
Or just I called it the Zettelcast in game for a while. That's kind of Andrews and I. The box which holds the cards is called
Yeah.
the Zettelcast. And
The basic unit is card in the AO mentality. The basic unit is message in the dashboard mentality. The two represent the same unit of information. The discrete parts of what the system is willing to shoot out of itself into itself. Right? The atomic parts, the particles.
that schema. Wait, what part of the combo was that? Sorry. I just loaded up. Uh-oh. No crash.
I'll be right back. Sorry.
No crash. Yep. Gotcha. Well, hopefully we're still streaming when you get back because I think OBS might be crashing right now. Oh, there we go. Yeah, not sure what just happened there. OBS, the streaming software, froze up for a bit. And at any rate, we are taking a break. But we'll just, what did you say, Jan? Index cards are connected with the glass bead game. Yep, that's very similar domain. And for a long time I thought, or would think, like, if you're using index cards in a sort of game scenario, like, that's what this board was intended for, actually, in the background. You can end up describing portions of reality using metaphor, which is how your cards are laid out on the table. And that's, I guess, the connection. It is streaming again. Thanks, buddy. Yeah, but we're We go for a short break, and I'll be right back. Very good job.
So where were we? I remember
yeah,
you
good
were
question.
saying something. I didn't hear what you were saying. So
Maybe Eon knows.
well, I've been keeping Eon abreast of things privately as well. So
Yeah, so we were talking about the motivation for this card game system,
all the
and
technical stuff.
I wanted it to be clear the scenario we're talking about.
Yeah.
And here is the scenario that I'd like to give, I guess, which I haven't before maybe, but we kind of have talked about it. Guild facilitation. That's what you would call
Yes,
it.
you've many times.
You take any, I guess in the past many, but this would be my concrete grounding scenario. Is you are a guild facilitator. It doesn't matter for what. It could be a community garden. It could be part of city council or something.
I have a
Doesn't
question,
matter.
a clarifying question.
But you're all coming together, and the job of the guild facilitator, let's say, or multiple, is to utilize this type of a card system to, whatever their concern is, whatever their purpose is, allow that intelligence network to like emerge.
So when you're talking about a guild facilitator, I assume you're talking about those who are classified as masters versus those who are classified as members.
Yeah.
Okay. So
Right. So
it's-
you
it's-
need at least one. There would ideally be many.
yeah, the idea of facilitation is as being like a delegated role.
And it's sort of a gradient range. Like any member has certain
Yeah.
intuition as to what mastery
So,
entails.
My clarifying question is this: is it an accurate assumption that I've made with regards to AO when it comes to like it lets you put down the cards with whatever context that you want to do?
It's just a
but
piece of paper.
But then, yeah, like it just sort of stays there as a static piece of information. Whereas the concepts I'm trying to address is like once a piece of information makes it into the system, the system will respond to it in a specific way. One of them being the conversation engine, the other being like it has a meaning.
For example, if you were to create
Like an
a
overarching
protocol,
meaning.
if you were to create a protocol card, these listeners on your app software would be like, okay, a card type of protocol just came in. Now I need to add that to the database of like whenever you're looking at protocols or action types, this one is available, and it's been entered
active.
into your UI.
It's active. So like if you enter the protocol card,
This is not easy to
and-
program, even if you knew what you're doing.
right. So
sure.
that protocol card now becomes part of the whole protocol stack of what happens to the different parts of the system.
Right.
So it immediately takes effect unless it's not active.
Yeah, and that's like eating your own dog food, because the software itself should be this reflexive to its environment as what it's proposing to help Guild do,
Yeah.
which is to be reflexive to its environment by having a proper and shared and updated brain space of that map.
One way I've described the situation is like having root access on Linux or any Unix system, really. You
Administrative access.
If you put in that rm dash rf star slash star into your command line,
Space
you're
slash.
going to fucking bork your system, and it won't stop you from doing it whatsoever.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Like, that's how I see the dashboard. I don't see the dashboard as being like this protected,
Yeah.
never
Managed.
yeah,
You're
like,
right. That comes with that responsibility, I guess, because it's supposed to be cleanly interfacing with different layers below.
it's all from the same ideals. Like, Linux was born out of copyleft, for example, right? Copyleft is what we're doing with the dashboard, essentially.
We are a GPL3.
Oh yeah,
Yes.
for sure. I actually put the license in for the repositories.
Mhm. Good. Yeah.
For sure. Take the code. I don't give a shit. I love the fact that if you think I'm smart enough to address your problems, take my solution, use it, praise it, whatever, hate it, don't care.
Right. Yep.
And also liability. It prevents us from being liable for any mishaps.
Right. Because as if we're on the market trying to extract from
Yeah.
public good.
Yeah, so like it has that if you install this software, the liability is with you.
Right. Mm-hmm. Smart. Yeah, so again, just to get back to that, I wanted to create this, or show this scenario, convey a scenario, which is guild facilitation, a guild facilitator. So
Master.
the idea is kind of like, as I imagine it, somebody is given the microphone first. It's not the owner of the space, maybe, or the host, but it's to make magic happen
Demands.
on a mass scale, right? That's the guild facilitator. You hold the mic first, give instructions, and then things happen.
Right.
Right? Because you have a mass broadcast space.
And that is not even like a free point. It's more like the instructions you give are for demand collections. Right? Like mastery is
Right,
about
exactly,
collecting
yeah.
the demands.
Which so first instructions could be like everybody, like let's say you're broken down into tables.
What do you need?
Yeah, like
basically,
what do you want to?
What do you need out of
want to
this?
get out of it? Yeah, sure.
Yeah, so
Yep.
the
And
when
even
you're
just
talking
write down multiple cards. Like I want this,
when
I
you're
want
talking
that.
facilitation, it's already protocol like.
And then it could be like, okay, next everyone at the table combine any common needs. Okay, now you have sub guilds within your table, which are after this and that.
You
and
know
that.
what maps this
Okay,
out?
now we'd reshape the tables. Everyone move to where you're with subgroups of other like.
You know what we have mapped out already that we can utilize, not like as cleanly, but as an overarching
It didn't
theme.
seem clean to me, but
as an overarching theme.
Seems messy.
The spreadsheets I came up with for the corporation and the spreadsheet for the institute, because it lays out how the interactions between member to master to grandmaster needs to flow,
Mhm.
and the clear cut responsibilities of each.
Yeah.
So like being a master is
that
not
seems
like
like a great
lord.
point.
It's not like a lording
Um,
situation.
What I kind of hear from that is, in this, whatever guild is being facilitated, the facilitator's job in that moment is to bootstrap basically a corporation or whatever.
And they're bound to that protocol. Like that's the whole
An
reason.
institute corporation dynamic to just
Yeah.
instantiate that as the low level, top
Yeah.
level.
And as complex as those spreadsheets might be, like all of this can be honed in by a single person,
Right.
to some degree.
But that's what I'm talking about. It is, you all come together, become an organism
Yeah.
through information and media sharing.
Yeah, the holonic nature of it.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. So that's good. I'm glad we got that kind of clear. We can, I think, elaborate on that, like the metaphor, if you will, of having separate rooms, separate tables,
Yeah.
separate personal spaces. Right.
So
But this is, now we can build onto that with like the pouch DB and stuff.
Yeah.
How are we? Let's say that's our physical scenario. What's our digital scenario for that?
So with the digital scenario, we have AO to like sort of bootstrap off of visually, at least. You put
visually for sure.
You
Yeah.
put cards. You put cards inside other cards. Cards belong to people. Card mention people.
Mhm.
They contain all of that weird metadata that we might potentially
Yeah.
use this way, that way, the other way.
That's why I like, actually love that endeavor of AO to create something that looks actually like index cards on a web interface, right? You've got,
But overall, and this is, I'm trying to connect it to our system. Overall, what ends up happening technologically speaking is that you're saving rows and rows and rows into a table in a database. This card got added to this card, referencing that card.
now can we connect that analogy, not directly probably, or maybe we could elaborate on the physical space, but like a table being a certain database, like that you're sitting around.
Sure, that's like a trivial
Right, maybe
connection
not-
for anybody who's technically minded already.
Yeah, I'm not sure if it helps because I
don't think they're going to touch PouchDB if they don't understand these concepts. But
I mean, this technological
I'd
stuff
like to-
gets so complicated.
I'd actually like
that
to connect it to
it's gonna
some
quickly-
AO ideals.
quickly
and then-
divorce from it.
Yeah. I hear you. I'd like to connect it to our technological stack while preserving the ideal that AO brought to the table of like, I hold on to my stack. So,
Yeah, this is one of the two things I mentioned.
right.
I guess
So you have your PouchDB.
you can take your stuff and go.
Yeah. So you have your PouchDB instance to which you put cards in and take cards out from. That PouchDB instance can be configured to be very isolated, aka just talking
So
to
this
the,
is your
the file
database,
system. Yes.
right? So that we can analogize this with the card box
Mhm.
or the Zettelkasten, as it can be called.
Yeah, this is your data set. It's your file set. It's
But
whatever.
it's sort of it's a virtual thing because it can be stored in full on your local computer.
Yes.
Or it can be also stored in full on your cell phone, also stored in full on the cloud,
So think of
out there in the middle of nowhere.
So think
Correct?
Of, yes. So think of PouchDB as being a simple interface where you can post documents into, a document being a JSON piece of information, any JSON piece of information. You can post to it, meaning add. You can get from it. You can put to it, meaning
JSON
update.
is what again?
J-
This had to do with the schemas?
JavaScript object notation. So it's basically key value in JavaScript. You've seen this. You open a curly
Yeah.
brace, you give a key to something, a colon, and then you
Yeah.
describe what the value is.
Sure.
That's what you're putting into that database. It doesn't give a PouchDB does not give a shit about it as long as it's just JSON. It doesn't care about its structure. It doesn't care about if you have a schema. It just like you say put, okay.
Yeah, no, I get it. Building complexity out of the simple.
Then it gives it an ID, a revision ID, so that you can keep track of colliding updates,
Yeah.
and that's
Right.
it. That's it, unless you pull it back out. So it's a very simple interface of just says, put data in, get back data out. Put data in, get back data out. What implements
So like, sorry, I'm imagining
the saving of the data is up to whatever adapter that's in there.
Thinking ahead maybe about if your laptop goes offline, let's say for a few days, and you've updated something, but also that same something has been updated.
So hold on, PouchDB is
elsewhere.
Is an interface. It doesn't have to sit there and listen for anything on the internet. It could be intercept your request to save something, put it into a file. So if you're offline, it doesn't care. It's just going to retrieve it back from that file.
Right.
The other component to it is that PouchDB loves to sync with anything with the same interface. So if you can do those put, posts, gets,
Yeah.
and deletes in Pouch,
So you have a cloud interface with that type of signaling,
mm-hmm.
and then it just doesn't care.
Exactly. So it can connect to another database and present itself as that database itself. It can take
Right.
pieces of another database, pieces of a third
Yeah,
database,
so, but
and present that.
I guess I was wondering if the revision issue is handled right there,
Yes, it handles the revisions.
and it seems crude or primitive to be able to handle. I don't know, maybe I'm thinking of the scenarios a little more complicated than it is, but just like you have a revisions, let's say revision 100 here on the cloud and on your laptop or whatever, but they go offline from each other for
Mhm.
a while. But can things happen to here to cause more revisions, or is it based on only like you
So-
must have authenticated something into
So,
that?
so imagine you have a server database.
Because I'm just wondering the scenario of like can the cloud version get more revisions while you haven't committed anything yet
Yes.
here, and
Yes.
so now this
Potentially,
has gone
yes.
to revision 101, 102, 103, while
Yeah.
this one also went 102, 103.
So when you
yet
so when you sync up,
they may be completely something might have
so,
changed.
So when you sync up again, and it starts to try to churn its updates, and it's like tries to update an
Well,
older,
they
older
collide to each
older
other.
revision.
It's not
The-
older; it's the same. Let's say they each had 5 revisions, and they're like, "No,
Well,
I
no.
have 105.
Say-
No, I have 105."
Say an article has 2 authors. You sit in IP1, I sit in IP2. We both extract the same revision, start making our edits.
Oh,
You save before me.
Yeah. So you're trying to point to the fact that it's going to replay the conversation of these updates from 1 through 5 on each side,
Yeah.
and maybe they don't even collide, like at higher layers. But you
Right.
would need something taking
But-
account of those higher layers, I think, to test it.
But if you save before me and I try to save, right? So we have a situation where the server database is ahead of my client database. My client database will sync up with the server database and try to actually establish all of those data points. So now when I'm trying to save mine, which is before all of those updates came through, it's going to say like you're trying to save onto a revision that's no longer valid. Would you like to pull the new information in, or would you like to overwrite the information that is on the server and create yet another new revision on top? You can take many different,
Sure.
so your application will be responsible for making those decisions.
I understand
And it's
that,
case by
that
case.
it's something that's been solved.
And
so that
it is case by
I have
case.
faith in that.
So the database will not be able to solve it. The database will be able to be like, oh, you're trying to update something that's already been updated, so I can't do this.
Yeah, but
But
look,
you make the
then
next
you've
decision.
then you've got this is your database which happens to exist on the cloud doing stuff.
If
Like,
some-
there's this activity.
Oh, if some,
so
so hold on.
it's yours.
If it's yours, then the only activity that should potentially happen to it is the activity you're responsible for.
Right.
So you'd be the synchronizing agent
Mm-hmm.
to deal with that, because otherwise everybody else will get blown out of the authorization would blow them out of the water.
Right.
You shouldn't be able to adjust somebody
Um,
else's pieces of data.
Yeah, like I imagine, I'm just
So
going through complex scenarios in my head, I guess.
So there's going to be a thing called ownership, and that ownership will sync, basically lock individual records until such time that the same authority has
Yeah, and this
the
is
ability
authorization, right?
to unlock.
Yeah, I guess I was
So yeah,
right.
that's what
thinking
authorization.
too far ahead.
Yeah, the authorization solves this. So if in doubt, think about another element of the system, not just the data, but like the application stuff, like authorization, authentication, audit, all of that stuff that goes in.
Yeah.
And they're different beasts.
I think this problem that I was thinking of doesn't come up because of that, but can definitely come
fair.
up in more advanced scenarios,
Yeah,
which we don't need to get into right now at all.
Yeah, that's totally fair. It's a fair concern to have, because when I started talking about like your data can exist over here, over here, over here,
Yeah.
how in the fuck are you going to make sure that you don't fuck it up in any way? Well, one of the first things is like, who owns this data? Who has the authority to actually change it? Why?
Mhm.
All of that will synchronize it.
Yeah, but there's such weird things like, and not to get back into it, but if you have, say, a node at your house connected via ham radio or something to a peer, and that just comes into your local system, but let's say it's offline or something, you know, like something can happen local to this part of your dashboard.
Yeah, they always
That-
try to sync up, and as soon as the sync up fucks up, you're getting notified as to like,
But
oh,
every other place you're looking at, that message never arrived or hasn't been flooded into the system yet because it's still waiting in a hard drive.
So you wake up your computer, it tries to sync up with a database, it realizes that
Oh, by the way,
a record is trying to add will not sync up with it, an error. The user interface then
I was
comes
going
up
to read that, Eon.
The user
You just kept talking though, Jenny.
sorry.
No problem.
The user interface will basically say, oh, we have all of these different changes. However, our sync mechanism is conflicting here and here and here. How do you want to handle? Like you
Yeah.
you will basically come back to this person and say, this is what Git does.
Like,
This is how GitHub works.
I assume we're going to get through the stack more and illuminate other things that kind of do complex stuff like that, checking of rules and all that kind of stuff.
We try with the happy path first, and then everything else after.
Right. Yeah. Assuming smooth sailing.
Yeah.
So, but I was just thinking of something that, again, this is getting back to like even before geotabs, was like the peer update protocol as an idea of when it's not only just yourself, that of course you only authorize your own internal things and can manage that, but you are now also cooperating with peers on, say, a gardening guild where you're
Right.
exchanging protocols related to this space. You're not the same.
And this is where agent and dashboard uniformity comes into play, because as soon as you start having conversations with other agents, which are all dashboards,
Right.
another
need a common protocol.
dashboard sets itself up as
Or
being the common
It's like
denominator.
whether we like it or not, or know it or not, we need common protocols to exist to communicate.
Right, and this is
there-
what the dashboard presents.
Yes, there is like
into the mix.
a fuzziness to what that means in the moment,
And-
but
or
we
where
do
they-
it.
or where they
we
live.
do that because most commonly we operate and interact in a sort of subconscious or unconscious way. The standard alignment window,
Yeah.
the cognitive alignment window.
And check this out. With the tech stack that I've chosen, with PouchDB, being able to sync conditionally with other databases across. What it means?
Other pouch DBs.
Yeah, like
Yeah.
anywhere from from any other setup, and so it's like a kind of like an ephemeral.
All good, buddy.
An ephemeral interface to create and read data that can go either out or be local and anywhere in between.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Yeah, like the idea of copying cards, index cards. They can go
But the
here,
idea-
there, they can come back.
but the idea is like, I am my own dashboard, you are your own dashboard, but then there's a virtual dashboard between us.
Of which we think that the other understands.
Right. Think about this PouchDB thing idea. it's like that dashboard does not it can exist as a pouch DB itself, but it's an underlying interface is such that some of the messages come to me, some of the messages come to you, some of the messages come to both of us. The actual database does not exist. All it does is sync with other databases, and as soon as that interaction is paused or done, it goes away and gets recreated. Goes away, gets recreated. It doesn't care.
I'm not sure what you're pointing at, what part you're pointing at.
I'm saying that like with pouch.
You're talking about a running program being ephemeral in that it does data things and then goes
the
away.
Database
like the RAM gets cleared out.
The database itself can be ephemeral in the sense that you can set up a database that all it does is create sync points across various other databases pretending to be them. So it just channels information from other sources that are connected to it, pretending to be their source of truth.
Mm-hmm.
So if I am a
Yeah.
dashboard and you're a dashboard, we can create such an ephemeral database out of our two databases to sync up every time we are engaging in conversation. The data still gets cleared to both of us, but the actual database that's set between us isn't quote unquote
Yeah, okay, I get it.
real.
I get what you're saying. And programmatically speaking, you would have this raw data and log conversations to process, which bring up this virtual database in the moment of contact.
Yeah.
And then it goes
And
away.
it looks exactly the same as if it was always there. Like there's zero difference between what you're talking to here versus there. It's just on the underlying mechanisms behind where data gets persisted. That is up to PouchDB. And I said all of this to try to cover the very key point of AO. Who owns data and how?
Right.
Well, you do, and based on your choices. That's the how.
Right. Well, it truly is getting to be winter around here.
Cold?
Hello.
Getting the heater?
I do have a heater though.
I'll be right
Which is nice.
You're right back.
And yep, so with that, we shall return. Yeah. eat, sleep, work, repeat.
All right. So PouchDB.
Yeah, so that's good that we talked about PouchDB.
So on the one hand side, we have our create, read, update, delete interface. That's like very clean cut. You put stuff in, you take stuff out, you update stuff, you delete
eat,
stuff.
you sleep, you work,
Right.
you repeat.
Like
Right?
it's very cool. Very clean, very very simple. The second part of what we just described is the ephemerality of the database, of the persistence, specifically the persistence layer. Ephemerality means really the data will live based on how you configure your PouchDB instance to behave. So you have like a slew of options there, right?
Right.
Everything from keeping everything completely local
Yeah.
to
Interface
just
with
being
the
an
cloud.
aggregate of like other services entirely.
Yeah.
Objects from here, objects from there, objects from here, objects from there, depending on what the object is.
Yeah.
You can have like all of that stuff. So anything in between. So that addresses the the AO question. But now I'd like to like move off of the
Nice and warm heater.
But now I'd like to move off a
Did
little
we
bit.
answer the AO question?
The
What is
AO
what
the-
is the AO question? You're talking
no, no.
about localization.
Yeah,
the
yeah, yeah.
ability-
Who owns the data? Who owns the cards?
what do they
can
call
I can I keep my
what do they
cards
call
with
it?
me?
In many circles, it's called unenclosability, which references the non-ability or disability or non-possibility of some outside actor denying you that service or data or whatever.
Okay, like you're not being enclosed in somebody
Enclosed
else's...
by the market. So that this has to do with...
Yeah.
It's really a market term, I think. There
I think
was
it's the
like-
reverse of the way I think about it.
When the cities came into their own, and commons land was being claimed, it was called the enclosure period or something like that. Like there's
Yeah, I'm on the same page already.
right. So that's where the power for that term comes. Unenclosability of your data, of your experience. You can't be denied that whatever you're doing.
Right.
With your own data, your own program.
There is no dictating protocol that says that this dashboard has to be on the cloud versus on the file.
Yeah.
Aside from the fact of utilitarian demands. So if the utilitarian demands of a dashboard is such that it has to be shared in order for it to
Right.
like even work,
In which case,
that's a different story.
yeah, and that there's a balance to that because there's vulnerability in that,
And it doesn't
but
prevent
there's also necessity to
and
it.
it doesn't prevent the enclosability of your own personal stuff, even if you do venture out to the shared element of
Yeah,
the
there's like a
dashboard.
gradient to it, I guess. Like, you'd like to be able to take your data and move elsewhere to any other system or whatever.
Well-
But what impression you've left on that system is also its own sort of property, if you will.
Right, but at the same time,
So
if
you
you're
can't deny that system from existing.
if you're choosing to put yourself out onto the network,
Yeah,
you're
right.
making the choice
Yeah,
of
yeah.
making your profile available
Yeah,
to
so
that network. It's a choice.
It goes both ways.
Yeah, it's a choice. Like
The fact that you can take things offline means also that anything can be taken from you, quote unquote. In other words, copied. Like you don't have control over that. What happens? You've spread information.
if
Right.
you've spread any information onto the network,
Yeah.
it's gone. It's in the network.
That's the complete flip side of it, I guess. Which there's
So-
dangers to that, but there's also that's what's good about it.
But it's the
a
same thing as stepping outside your
double-edged
house.
sword.
Like every time I step out my house, I have to be aware that I'm going to step in dog shit. And sometimes I do,
Mm-hmm.
which happened this week, unfortunately.
Damn.
I know, right on the fucking middle of the goddamn place when nobody usually leaves dog shit.
The sidewalk.
I actually believe there's somebody who's doing it on purpose. Like, takes a huge dog out and literally goes to places where kids play and leaves fucking big ass turds. I'm
Could
pretty
be.
sure because it's very, very patterned, if you will. It's always where the kids are. So somebody's getting their fucking jollies off of it.
Maybe.
It's a psychopath that doesn't murder, but makes
Could
people
be.
step in shit.
You never know. But yeah, it's a wild world we have to deal with, and we need
Anyway.
lots of cooperation and compassion and people working together, and that's what makes society work.
So, the cool thing about this is the addressing of the who owns what is addressed by how you configure your pouch, so to speak. Adapters available for every situation that you might think
Yeah.
of.
Right. It could be totally private, even encrypted.
Exactly. It could be like a clear data file that you're saving to your hard drive that you can process with other tools. It
Yeah.
doesn't matter. PouchDB is an interface and nothing but an interface with adapters galore.
Yep. And it seems like this versioning and synchronization has kind of,
It's built right into it.
so that's what this layer is for
It
us.
just allows us to have an ephemeral persistence layer. By
Right.
ephemeral, I mean not that it cannot be decided, but you really do get to decide everything about it. So it can be transient and it can be completely solid. It doesn't matter. And that's the end of where PouchDB has any responsibility. It's a persistence layer that presents data out of whatever configuration you give it. So the next layer is to grab a representation of that data and cache it into RAM.
So you're taking whatever you think is the best idea of what PouchDB is providing at your locality,
So
and
if you query
sending it
and
up to work with it in memory.
yeah,
What's
that's
that? What's that package?
that's Redux.
Redux.
It acts as your active database.
So
the
it's
thing that gives you the source of truth about right now in the moment.
But this is essentially the archetype being passed up by PouchDB. Is that
Yeah.
virtual, beautiful, amazing?
so
It's
every-
just one database. You don't have to care about the location.
Exactly. So every time PouchDB itself gets an update from somewhere else, it pushes that update into this RAM-held version of it as well.
Right.
So it constantly updates it from the back end. So
Like you can't say that this isn't RAM held.
No, this is no
The Pouch
that,
DB.
that's up to its implementation.
I
It's-
don't like the
it will cache
when you say, "Oh, this is RAM held." Well,
no,
they're
no,
all
no, no.
RAM
Our RAM, like from our perspective, CouchDB is PouchDB, sorry, is the persistence layer. Whether it uses RAM or not is up to its implementation. Like it's up to it. Sure, it's
Well,
going to,
it
it's going to
ultimately has
do
to.
stuff. It's going to do stuff.
It is a
internally.
running program. It is
It's
operating in RAM.
It's sophisticated. It's got its own caching
And the
mechanisms.
values that it's passing up to Redux are in RAM before they get to Redux.
Yeah, the point is that in our app.
Sorry to tangent there on you.
No,
with
it's fine. It's
with
fine.
The architecture.
The point is that in our app, this part of the data lives somewhere out in persistence, whether or not RAM is involved. Whereas this part of our app is readily
Yeah.
in the RAM.
Can't
always.
be.
It's just there.
Yeah, and that's an interesting. It reminds me of like hard problem type level thing of like when are you coming from one side and flipping over to the other, like
Well, in
into
this-
the active from the passive.
In this
will.
case, what happens is that every time
The order, the chaos.
every time a Redux store is instantiated, comes into being, the first thing it does is sync up with what data is in the database. So it starts out empty, and it goes, what's my initial data set? It asks that query.
Yeah.
It sends that query. The database goes, it's this. Fill up your
Yeah.
RAM space with this
course,
data. If I have updates, I'll update the RAM parts.
So this gives a programmer at a higher level
A unified view
an
of the
assumption
data.
that
Yeah.
this is simply the database.
Exactly. You don't have to worry
Okay.
about
And
sources.
what is that next higher level? Let's just continue on, I guess.
The next is a forking situation. So
Server client or front
no,
end,
no, brain tactile.
front end, back end.
Yeah, so we've just loaded up our quote unquote central nervous system with information.
Okay, what's that package?
Redux. It's still Redux.
No, okay.
The central
But
nervous
the next
system.
thing you're talking about,
So
what are we
it
doing with
it
that?
goes between refine and X state. It forks into
Okay.
two situations.
cool, yeah. And is this kind of like an abstract concrete situation, or?
Concrete. In one is more abstract in
Yeah.
concreteness, and one is more concrete in concreteness.
Obviously, we're moving towards concreteness.
So,
Obviously.
So, the analogy I've been making is the central nervous system, right?
Yeah, we've been talking to
with Redux.
this body analogy, I guess.
So picture Redux as being like this pipeline of persistence to memory. So you have the persistence pouch, and then memory is being created there.
There's a parallel with the neurochemical operating system layers.
So this is like the body as the whole. But the body as a whole, on its own, is kind of dumb.
Yep.
There's two aspects to it that make it less dumb. One is the tactile situation, where it feels out the outer world and sees what that means to itself. And the other is taking all the happenings within itself and transforming them into a concrete central nervous state.
Yeah, the higher level thing. The term dumb, I think, is actually like in a way kind
thin
of
versus rich client.
No, I mean just talking about the stacking of life. To say, oh, the nervous system is dumb. You're talking about how it operates, I guess, but at the same time, that archetype of what it is and can do is like perfect in a way, because it does exist. It's all of the incredible detail packed into layer beyond layer beyond layer beyond layer.
By dumb, I'm talking about synthetic neurological computation. It just computes. It has a representation of the outer world, but its response is not like abstracted out into a narrative.
Right. This lines up with the
It's how your spinal cord responds when you touch a hot plate.
this lines up with the cognitive alignment window being in standard mode, if you will, as opposed
autopilot,
autopilot mode, as opposed to debug, which is probably a better term for that. But
what does this information
the slowing
mean
down and seeing like what are my assumptions right now. Even let's step back from like what's even going on right now. Like this is a different.
And this is what the responsibility of that X-state library is supposed to be about. Like that stepping back from the pure reactive perspective into a more abstracting a way. What does this data mean? How does it flow?
Okay.
How do I represent this?
Refine is
Refine
good
is
for presenting ontology. The debug is breaking that ontology apart.
So refine is like if your impulse happened from the spinal cord, Refine will do.
But X
We'll do the
state,
jerk-in motion.
X state must be allowing you to update what's inside of Refine in the
Yes.
normal thing. So
So whatever happens in Refine goes through the Redux central nervous system, and that information will then get passed on to through protocol. So like, if Refine does this, right, sends this signal, then the Redux store is going to be like, okay, this signal is meant for my X state processing. So it is going to set things up first so that it can happen,
that's good.
and send it off, and then recall all of the different changes it has to make to itself, and then go through it painstakingly, going one by one,
Making
going,
that's
can
a
I
key.
even
A
do
key
it?
right there is making changes to itself. I want to admit, but I didn't want to interrupt you, that like I'm lost in some ways, but also I get it in other ways. Of exactly what we're building is
Mhm.
what I mean, like how it's structured.
But
But
it sends off to a black box.
I'm
and the
glad
black
that
box is like
we've
going,
made
change
this
yourself this way,
distinction
and that way.
between Refine and X state. And again, must be talking X state because you're talking about updating.
Yes.
This is feedback.
That's
so
exactly
X
what I'm
state is
saying,
giving
yeah.
you feedback on Refine, which is your normal cognitive mode.
Yeah, I think lacking that
So
feedback is what
we're
made.
pretty tight in this analogy as far as like the cognitive alignment window. Am I correct?
Just before you said that is what was prompting me to like try to explain it again, but the fact that you said it this way
Mhm.
is like taming
Yeah.
taming that
Yeah, that's
instinct
good.
down.
Yeah, don't worry about it. I got you.
So yeah, it's like if you think about it, if like we pretend that X state is the brain, what you should notice is that all it can do is get some very, very, very narrow stream of information out of the central quote-unquote nervous system, and only send a narrow stream of
Back.
updates back to it. So it has a very clear and
Yeah.
defined interface
This
back to it.
like interface, that's a good term, between layers.
Hmm. And we're making a distinction between the automated nervous system that just like has to be the correct unified thing, versus the thing that
So,
tries to make it
in
get changed
In a
any
programming
way.
sense, in our UI, we're going to be building stuff with building blocks or whatever.
Yeah. So
whatever pieces.
that's refined land, by the way.
That's what I pointed to that, although nobody saw. But and within our UI also, there's going to be updates, the updatability, the revision ability of like
Yeah.
this should change, or like this is why, like from this experience, or that's why this should happen. This type of notation ability within your app.
So
That you're describing ontology, but also updating that ontology. Two kind of different pieces.
So in the analogy speaking sense of the central nervous system and all of that, I tried to call that
Which
the-
we learn. We
the-
keep learning, never stop.
So the layers are the extremities, the central, right, and the localized. So the localized has been what we were talking about with state. Refine is like our extremities, and the idea behind there is that like it's like your nervous system in your fingertips or your nostrils or your tongue or any of those kinds of actual
This is the most basic setups.
outside informants.
Like you learn because something pokes you, or ouch.
Yeah.
Right? Oh, I don't want to do that again.
And so that information gets sent to the
Yeah.
central
You're talking about
nervous
the
system.
nervous building blocks, so the subconscious, if you will, of just experience creating action.
Yeah. Yes. And then it has that point of decision making where it's like, I can handle this myself, which is like what your spinal cord does when you touch something hot. So when you touch something hot, it's an experimental thing. When you touch something hot, you actually remove your hand before your brain actually processes
Yeah.
the pain.
Right.
And the reason behind this is that your nervous system in your spinal cord is actually geared towards doing these kinds of
yeah.
reactions.
And there is, I believe we would be born with certain reaction shapes, like
Mhm.
this
Mhm.
is like a protective
or
come back in.
or holding
So
on
it
to-
does. Your nervous system doesn't know or care, but it just lost a bunch of nerves, and there's a massive signal coming through. The result could be to clinch up like this. So if you touch something, now you're back.
Yeah.
You're just going away from the outside world, right?
Or something less devastating, like the instinct that babies have to grasp. Right? Like if you've experienced this.
Right. Yep.
Right.
We do that when we wake up. Yeah. Right?
That's a spinal cord response. There's no abstract thought behind it. It's just like this part of your hand gets touched, this part of your hand gets clamped. Like the algorithm is already in there. It's
Right.
not even like.
And that's a very different thing from a like pure pain response. That's almost like a curiosity response.
No,
Just
this is like
to grab and use.
This is like a breathing response, or a shitting response, or a peeing response. Like something is feeling a certain way, you need to do this. Your body knows, right? Like
Yeah.
it just you don't think.
I
about
guess,
this.
but I guess
when you're
what I'm
as you're
pointing
breathing
to.
when you're unconscious.
Hold on a sec. If you're gonna grab something, it's part of you. Like this is a different response from get the fuck away from that. You just touched hot.
Sure.
The grabbing thing that's a part of you.
But this
That's
is
not a. It's not that you're.
no.
you
It, it's on the same level because it's happening in a context where there's been zero abstraction to begin with. So it's just like one more way the body
But I guess
will move.
There's got to be a level that you can distinguish between that. There's like
So
two
the-
different, at least mind states.
The level here is actually distinguished by the fact that one is a pure instinctive response common to a set of whole shit ton
But I mean,
of
there's
species.
there's an experience to that.
So no, I'm saying that one response is geared towards an evolutionary start that's way back, so nerve system response to pain and pleasure altogether. The
Right.
secondary
Well, that's
response,
the dichotomy. Why did you separate the two?
because
Isn't it-
because the secondary response actually comes later in different in
you
very
mean
specific.
pain and pleasure.
No.
You said
Res-
there's two things.
Pain and pleasure response are more primitive.
That's what I'm asking. Why you
So-
separated them?
because
if
the
it's
other one
just one
because the other
thing.
one is grasping. It's way more sophisticated in
But I think
Organization.
it's not a pain response, though.
no, it's not. It's not. That's what I'm trying to get to.
Okay.
So one happened way back in the evolutionary past to just simply avoid damage. The secondary response that we're talking about, grasping, being still embedded into the body,
Yeah.
has to do with the species of the creature that we're talking about. So it happens in the monkeys, it happens in the apes, it happens in the species for which
Sure.
the tree climbing element had
Grabbing.
had
That's a big thing.
created the mechanism behind in the spinal cord to have an algorithm for it. So one
Yeah,
algorithm
yeah.
existed way beforehand,
You mean?
but they're both embedded algorithms.
You mean even the fact of like we have muscles on the front of our hand and on the back. The back can like bend it that way, but the front muscles can bend it this way.
Actually, all of those muscles are here. All of this
Well,
are tendons.
of course, but you know what I mean.
Yeah.
There's a set of muscles that are going one way or another.
Right. By having those muscles, now there's more programming to like instinctually
What you're
use
talking
them.
about is that this arm is a tool archetypally understood through evolution or whatever by the body that normally is used to contract these muscles in the inside. That's what allows it to be used as an extension to other tools.
More. It also has to do with the fact that the
So-
young of the species of these grasping mammals will have to grasp onto their mothers.
Obviously, yeah. So why would their DNA be trained to respond like this whenever something touches here? That you just go like that.
It's not even DNA though.
It makes
It comes from the DNA, but those expressions could be different
what I
from
mean.
a single DNA code. Those expressions could be made different. You can use the same DNA to cause chickens to grow teeth. Raptor teeth, specifically. Like actual meat-eating, shredding teeth.
They should do that.
They do.
And then
They
battle
did
them.
do that.
Nice. When's the next tournament?
But you see the point I'm saying, like there might be two different evolutionary events that would progress the pleasure pain to be more primitive, grasping to be more quote unquote sophisticated, given it's reliant on the
I was
species
just trying
that it's
to
on.
point to how obviously if it's one or the other, the outside or the inside muscles, which ones are going to be more bound to an internal pattern, which is inborn.
What's more interesting is that the entire body constitutes the entire ontology. Pointing back to Redux being the implementation, that's what it's supposed to represent in that case. So like that instance and moment in time of through evolution of persistent data. In the moment, that data jumps up at you in RAM, and that's your ontology. Everything given to you, like all of the different reflexes, could be built up from before, could be built up at the same time.
Ideally, what you're saying would be, or is, that the ontology is built in the moment out of the data based on the categorization of the data itself.
Mm-hmm.
It's just
in a sense, yeah,
conglomeration of the data.
And all that Redux is responsible for is maintaining consistency within itself. So every time it reflects that data back into persistence, it's been from a consistent point of view. Every time it's
You're talking about the fact that data has to be interpreted. It has to be interpreted at a certain version. So you have to say not only what language, but what version of that language potentially is used to interpret that.
Please.
Feeling warm yet?
Wee bit.
Feeling the effects?
It's nice. No, it's nice. It's
Yeah.
what the doctor called for.
Love me in my heat dish.
So yeah, it's exactly what you're saying.
Voila.
It's exactly what you're saying, and it's like Redux is responsible for raising up to the moment in which the action takes place. What that moment is ephemeral and guided by the dataset in the persistence layer, which is gathered by PouchDB.
It seems like
which is itself coordinated.
the playground you'd have to play in order to verify that things are valid, that changes or updates are even valid in the moment.
Yeah. So when you set up Redux like this, you also set up all of the constraints about how it can change, such that you can't modify it in any single way that is illegal. So that means when you go off and try to calculate an algorithm in your brain, the X state part of the situation, it grabs a piece of that data, localizes it for itself, copies it. It just copies it. It doesn't care about what happens to it after the fact.
Right.
It runs its algorithms and says, change this, 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 and this, and this, and this. That request comes back to the central nervous system. It's at that point that it's going to be like, oh, you've succeeded, so your logic must be correct. I'll try to integrate you. But as soon as it tries to integrate this, 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 and this, and this that it told it to, and something fucks up, it goes, all the way back to where we were.
Yeah.
User, what do you want to do? Or if I can solve this problem here, retry. Try it with a new updated set and see if it works. Depends on, again, the situation.
Yeah, and reminds me, you were talking about, like, it seems like checks can be made at different points in the process of data propagation.
So you're going to have checks in your local data processing, You're going to have checks in your sensory data processing. It's like, wait a minute, this configuration of input makes no fucking sense. You're saying I'm touching a color, not seeing one? Are you off your fucking rockers? That sort of stuff.
Right. Like a protocol where when feeling equals red,
Yeah.
then do this.
Yeah, sent to brain, I saw red.
Or I felt red.
I felt red. Sent to brain, I felt red. Brain goes, when feeling red, change the perception of this object, and this object. Changes in perception go into the main ontology. The interface reads a different perception mode. That's the happy path. No errors.
Dealing with the fact that you can't feel red.
No, you're dictating to this brain
dictating.
that you did feel red,
right.
And it says, oh, if you feel red, change the hue of this and the hue of that and the hue of this in your main interface.
Ideally, yeah. There should
how
be
it
a
should be.
metaphor.
That's how
for what is red.
That is the metaphor, actually. The metaphor for the operation of the system. You have your tactile. I felt red. The nervous system says, I have a tactile information from I felt red. Feeds it to the brain. What the fuck does that mean? Oh, it means turn the hues of this and this and this and this and this and this and this to these values. In the meantime, I felt blue came in.
Maybe. My originally point actually was kind of like, how do you even feel red? Like, what does that mean?
Oh, in this case, it means one thing on the first layer. Message of type, I felt red.
But like
Then
tactile, in a sensory, like if you're touching this, how does it actually
it's
feel
all fiat.
red?
It's fiat. It just says, I felt it. Like your photon receptors. They don't
Yeah.
like,
So
they just say green. They don't give a shit about how.
So, yeah, you must of course be talking about like interfacing with technology in ways that make sense to us. So if that's the
like if this is the button you pressed,
the term, the icon, the image that we use to associate with that feeling, that's all that matters.
Right.
Is that when
That's
we get that feeling again, we know that that's what we meant when we told the dashboard, I felt red. Right?
In a sense, yeah. It's like your brain doesn't give a shit about actual, what do you call it?
I think we need to adjust the levels here, boys.
Your brain wouldn't give a shit about like the frequency of color. It gives a shit about which color it was, right? So what tactile does is transform button clicks, scrolls, drag and drops, typing, all of that into meaningful information to the central nervous system from the perspective of, oh, I need to respond to it. I can do it directly, or I can send it up to my brain to figure out what changes to myself I should make.
Mm-hmm. And the brain is sitting there monitoring for certain patterns.
Actually, it's more cool. It's a little cooler than that. It doesn't sit there statically like that. It gets instantiated each and every time the central nervous system needs something from it. So it recreates the central brain for its own purposes for
like
each individual.
when you have to respond in a conversation, and then the next thing you have to say, your whole body knows, hey, it's not up to me. Your brain, dude, have to create something to say now.
That's actually not too far not actually far from biology, though. Our thinking that this is all what do you call it? smooth,
Mhm.
right? Like our experiences of moment to moment to moment to moment has been decried by the model for a long time, that it's very much these discrete moments.
Mhm.
This is what it's referring to.
Very specific.
This is in the exact same mode of operation, if you will. In that each time the brain comes up, it's like it's borrowing from the main thing, works in isolation, and feeds back to the main thing, and that thing is what's feeding back the rest of the brain. So if you have multiple things in the brain happening, it's not because they're communicating with each other, it's because they're sending information to the central nervous system, which sends information back to
Yeah.
the different brains.
All the cells in our body continue to metabolize and do stuff with the sugars that we put into our bloodstream via the stomach and chewing and eating stuff.
But you can see how it's all smoothing out, right?
It's very smooth.
Like, it's one feedback mechanism, but it's many feedback mechanisms in one. And they have their own private conversations before they send the main messages back to the main system. And those main messages help guide the rest of the intricate messages
Mhm.
that
Like the
guide the
you're
rest
talking
of
about
the
like
world.
body as a metaphor. Again,
Yeah,
like
it's-
that kind of idea.
Yeah, like body, brain, and the central nervous system. So
Yeah.
the body,
Like, sorry, I was just thinking.
it's still all
your,
nerves. It's still all nerves, though.
Your like digestive tract or whatever, like after your stomach and all that, like you can get signals from there that you're hungry, including the stomach, right?
Through the nervous system.
But that doesn't always happen. You're not always feeling that. But it's like there's a
Adrenaline
the
will shut it
ontology
off,
is
yeah.
like the body of different organs together, right? And they have different messages, and they all have access to the same nervous system. I think that's important.
Yeah.
Each organ has access to that nervous system.
That's
right?
all the tactile stuff. So
Right.
your stomach is sending messages based on the food you get from the outside into it.
Right.
Right?
Yeah. Signals from the world, your interface, your connection. Food is
Right.
our biggest
I like the
connection.
idea. I like the idea of like touch and eye, because those are the Buddhist main
The classics.
sensory elements.
Yep. I like the description through Buddhism of sight, of making contact with an object physically, like you see a light is on. That's like contact, and that there's different layers of that experience of like,
But
oh,
the
now
physical frequency of light doesn't get anywhere near there. There's just red, blue, green.
But I mean, you're already past the organ, the eyeball, through the ocular nerve, sending signals, and you've already recognized an object, a light turning on, and like
Right.
these different stages within your mind of like what
So
just
yeah,
because
yeah.
a light switched on, like these things are happening, right?
That's why I keep calling it tactile. So like if you press a button on the screen, or if you move your mouse cursor, or if you do any of those things, that's what it feels, right? Like those are the changes in the external environment it feels.
Right. Yeah, I was just pointing to like that was one of my kind of favorite earlier Buddhist imagery was that there's different phases of this signal coming through your being
Yeah.
in stages, right?
But also remember, you know how like the brain is ephemeral too, because what do you call it? You can have synchronization events coming from the back end, if you will.
Sure, yeah,
Well,
maybe.
those ones also have to come from somewhere tactile to begin with. So the fact that you're
It's an impression made.
yeah
reflecting
from the
itself.
from the tactile perspective.
Yeah.
So like something else happened over here, got fed through the common database and got fed through over here. So even this from the back end part comes from the top.
Yeah,
There's nothing.
it's
that's
good to
not
know
tactile.
about that. That's the X state shit right there, man.
The X-state shit is like taking everything from tactile and giving it a real meaning.
That update, yo,
And an update is essential.
feedback.
But essential for the inner being, the spirit.
So with that, we're going to take a short break. Yeah, of course.
Of Redux.
Yeah.
In flight.
Yeah. Well, ideally,
So it's
The-
that flexible.
that's the eating the dog food thing.
Yeah. So
Right.
can I repeat it just for the sake of the audience?
Yeah.
So the thought that should have occurred to me earlier but didn't is
I
that,
thought it did. I thought that was obvious.
well, no, it wasn't. Not yet.
Oh, just
So-
to
so-
the extent that it is. Yeah.
So all of these libraries that we're talking about are configuration based, so where you can basically instantiate them using data from the database. And what I'm basically got to in my thinking
Yeah,
is
yeah.
that
There is no
you can set it up such that
border where this is how it's configured and you can't touch that,
Mhm.
and this is the data that's being manipulated by the configuration.
right.
It's
So
like that configuration itself is just data. So
and we've presented this central nervous system as this like the end road of everything that can and cannot happen. But the point that I came to is
it's
this.
the same theme.
Because it's a configuration to
Feedback.
itself. What happens in X state could potentially change the configuration of the central nervous system, such that
That's the point.
keeping it evolving.
Mm-hmm.
So that's another element to this architecture that we've been choosing. So we have discussed at length the persistence. And we've touched on the central nervous system being redux, which
Persistence. Can you better define what persistence is based on our conversation? Because I don't exactly know what you mean. Like that we've been talking about
persistence is like saving a file.
Redux, is that what you mean by persistence? That the database itself
It
looks...
syncs with persistence.
looks-
Redux will sync with persistence is pouch. Redux is in RAM. A representation of pouch.
So by persistence, you mean then just the lowest level storage, almost?
You can shut off your computer, come back to it, and it's still there. So file system,
yeah.
database.
Okay, so
any
that's
kind of
definitely pouch. What
piece
we were
of
talking
paper.
About. It's the only thing concerned about whether it was on a piece of paper or in your computer on a text file.
Yeah, it has
or on
all
the cloud in a
any
database.
virtual representation of that. Yes, it's dealing with trying to
But
figure out.
okay,
that out.
here's what kind of flashed to me was the idea or the word persistence. To me, would mean that one copy of the beautiful database being passed up as the archetype to Redux. Right? Remember we talked about that's what PouchDB is ultimately giving.
No. So persistence should be thought of as something like you've made a request, you're making a second request, information from the first request has an effect on the second request, and so on and so on and so on. So instead of like that pure function idea,
Yeah. Okay, I see what you're saying. That it's dependent on an external media or collection to be changed.
It depends
changing over time. That's what's going to come back to you.
Depends on the timeline. Yes, if two different requests, the same request made on different points in the timeline,
Okay, I get.
will not
it,
get
yeah.
the same responses
Mhm.
anymore, or cannot be guaranteed to.
And that's referred to as persistence because there's a certain state, I guess.
Yeah,
Coming back to that.
yeah, between the two.
That state is what depends on what your output is going to be.
So persistence is managed by what's called a machine. That's where X state comes into play. So it takes all of those
420, yo.
So it takes all of those persistent elements from the ontology and figures out how do they change over time. Like this entity under the idea of 1, 2, 3, does it have an age of 1? Does it have an age of 2? Does it have an age of 3? Well, what is an age a factor of? Oh, it's a factor of when it was created versus how many minutes have passed. Right? It changes across time. That's what state means.
Mhm.
The thing that changes across time is what state is. So there's the identity of the thing, the attributes of the thing, and then there's the thing, the way it cycles through life.
In a fundamental sense, PouchDB is responsible for the fact that things change over time.
In keeping track of what changed and how it changed.
Makes sense.
So PouchDB is like, this is your latest version.
But
After all changes have been said.
What I meant earlier is, yes, that's its ultimate function is to provide that archetype for the next layer of language, of communication, so that it simplifies programming.
The cumulative cumulative, yes, changes that have happened since its beginning to its state now.
Ideally.
So it's going to be the representation of just right now. The latest incarnation, if you will. The latest incarnation. And so conflicts can be resolved by seeing if you have the latest incarnation versus not the latest.
Right. Yeah, and again, because it's you can assume a single author in many cases. You don't have to worry about, oh, my view has changed outside of my control.
Yeah, it doesn't have anything to do with that, actually. It's more like you have now two different situations. One of them, again, so we have the central nervous system, that's the database. The easiest thing to conceive, the source of truth of everything, gets uploaded from persistence into RAM for the moment.
Right, then we're in Redux land.
Right.
And again, this is what PouchDB has communicated up to Redux, is that perfect view of a database. As
And
if
then-
it's just one single entity
Right.
in all its scope.
And then Refine will read that and create an interface for the user, the tactile side, right? So it'll read pieces and portions of that Redux store, create you the interface, give you the button to touch it with, so to speak,
Right.
and be like, okay, I'll collect that information and send that back off to my Redux holder, pouch, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And
So
Redux,
this is your,
Redux goes, oh, I got these commands from Refine. I'm gonna channel them through the brain. and
Refine
get-
is also your, when you have a hole on, your listeners
yes.
that are
That's
set up on the outside,
That's
on the
it.
membrane.
It's like it's your authenticated user. It's your permission set. It's your requested resource that comes from the URL. It's your yeah. I think that's it basically.
Yeah,
But
baby.
yeah, so Refine is like is like geared towards collecting information from the outer world and translating it back to the main database, and it has its own cache. It has its own, like, it doesn't necessarily request information from you again if nothing's changed about it,
Mhm.
right? It's just it takes shortcuts. So just like your body will, take a shortcut from touching a hot pan and move away.
Of course.
It has like things like that already built into it to relate that kind of interaction. So
Mm-hmm.
Refine will take a picture of your
It's like a
snapshot.
collection of truths. And
Yeah.
this is the protocol idea too, I think. That there are protocols.
But each piece doesn't work with the central truth. It works with snapshots of the truth it captured
Right.
locally, works with that, then sends back information. And if it's wrong,
Right.
it gets feedback about that.
So there's a whole structure necessary for integrating these into a larger whole. Because
Yeah.
certain truths locally may not make sense on a grander scale.
So when your brain takes in the information from the source of truth, does its calculation, but something else like beat it to it and changed the ontology itself,
Uh-huh.
right? So now you're trying to commit all of your actions. Here's an example. You're a user. You're not banned. You start to create a post. The system allows you.
Not banned, that's good.
The system is
start.
the system is allowing you to create a post, right? Somehow a previous post got reported in while you're typing your post, which caused the moderator to ban your account from
Sure.
posting.
According to
So your authorization changed midway
Mhm.
as you're already doing an action you're permitted to do. So what happens when you save? Well, of course it needs to check again with the updated state of your information.
Yeah. So when you're looking at that request, if you will, there has to be like a sub icon, which is like locally confirmed, done the check, it's fine. Foreign confirmed, like on different servers, like there's got to be a syncing icon, like thinking like UI. You've got to know, like when you just freshly post data, it's got to propagate. It's
Yeah.
got to meet other areas. So there's got to be like an update center.
So-
Like for every action potentially.
So yeah, so like two ways that this could go. Nothing happened. Like you're not informed of anything. You try to save, it blows up on you. It says you're not allowed to post anymore. You're like, what the fuck? Another thing that could happen though is like
Mhm.
as you're typing the thing, your data set gets updated,
So, like-
your interface gets updated, and you're notified that it's like your account has been disabled.
Yeah.
You are no longer able to proceed with the action
So
that you're attempting
what
to proceed with.
You're talking about seems pretty complicated, but I think it comes down to if you're taking an action, in the process of seeing if that action can be updating the network, you learn of a new rule which invalidates it. You experience that as a user, like in real time. Like you click send, It's like, okay, syncing with server, boom, like, no, it didn't work, and now you.
Yes. Another thought I just had: theory and practice. In theory,
Right.
given the information you had,
Currently.
your action has a success, so to speak. In practice, the situation has changed. The theory is garbage.
Right. Like, let's say, let's take, have a scenario where there's a demand made on the network which is advertised and you offer to supply, but somebody else already completed that. Like, let's say
Yep.
it's not even
Yeah, that's
it's
exactly
not even who's going to supply this. It's like it's already done now.
Yeah, that's exactly what it is. Like, it's a competing set of requirements, in which only one set can actually.
Right, because it's
Proceed.
connected ultimately to, well, I guess in this case, land, which has a status, like either the dirt was delivered or it wasn't, and let's say it already is. They can't take more. So that demand is satisfied.
Guess what that's called in programming land? A race condition. Like, you got two entities racing for the same outcome, and they're kind of like blocked. Like
Yeah, so that's what we're talking about.
It's an actual
right now, I guess.
It's parallelism.
It's when
So-
you're having this openness to the program.
It came up because once I started
You're just
to
sensing inputs. Which one will come in first?
So yeah, it came up because of the realization that once I introduced X state as the quote unquote brain of the operation.
By the way, we're at about 20 minutes to go for the meeting.
Sure.
But yeah, X state
So
in
X
relation to as like the brain, the abstract, the upper order.
It opened up the notion of, like, you might have multiple signals coming back at the central nerve cord, right?
Yeah.
And if you have that situation, it's like, how if this one is isolated, this one is isolated, and this one is isolated, and this one is isolated, how do you coordinate once they all commit to their changes and they say, my logic is great, go, right? But they are all consisting of multiple changes. How do you coordinate
It's just never like that.
this and 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 this in a way that's so. Check this out.
Ultimately, I think you have to be called out to receive a
hold on,
signal
hold on.
that says, okay, this is wrong or whatever.
Hold on, I'm not describing this quite right just yet. Check this out. So, you have,
Race condition.
let's say, 4 parallel transactions going on at the same time. So the brain has been told
Okay.
to do this, to do that, to do this, to do this, and
And-
it's not been told to wait and wait or wait or wait. It's not been told to wait in sequence. It's just like, go, do all of them at once.
And let's say it's purchasing something from an account, your checking account, which has
Ah.
a finite amount of.
Yeah. You got it. You
okay,
got it.
so proceed.
You got it. You gotta have a situation in which none of those transactions go below the balance.
Your bank is either going to tell you yes, you have it, or no, you don't.
Right.
So you know that they're reliable on that.
So each of the 4 initiated transactions are going to have a multiplicity of message: deposit, retrieve, deposit, retrieve, deposit, retrieve, deposit, retrieve, deposit, or sorry, what's the takeout?
Debit or
Oh, that's debit and credit. Deposit, withdrawal. Right? So
Right.
each one of them can have multiple deposit withdrawals. Now, they're running in parallel. Right? So that means if they've all been committed at around the same time, you might have a
Parallel.
situation in which the first action takes place from one transaction.
and maybe very close together. What do you mean by parallel? Like, is the system even capable of true parallel?
How many processors do you have? It's a different question altogether.
Is it even possible?
But thinking about syncing between the situations is actually what the point is. Like, in parallel doesn't have to be perfect parallelization, but imagine a system that switches randomly between which process it's going to tackle next. Let's tackle this step next. So you don't have a guarantee. So each one sets up a set of actions in sequence for themselves, right? But you don't have a guarantee.
You're talking about the demand side,
yeah.
setting up its sequence. I
And
guess.
now, but because they're all running in parallel, you can have this action come from here, this action come from here, this action come from here, and this action come from here in sequence.
But you ultimately have to serialize it.
And so the
because
next time you come into action
the
over
bank
here,
account is only taking one command at a time. So
right, and that's what I'm
you
saying. That's what I'm-
serialize it, right?
yeah, and that's what I'm saying. But if there's multiple transactions in each, multiple back and forths of withdrawal and deposits in each, but they're all out of sync with each other. So one comes from this transaction, one comes from that transaction, one comes from this transaction. They might actually blow the account out of water by going negative because they're not synchronized on the upfront, so to
Well,
speak.
it's assumed that that's what's going to happen. If you have 4 transactions that all add up to more than what the account can handle, that's what I
so
proposed that scenario for.
So yeah, so there's like this whole mechanism where you lock data rows as soon as you use them in a transaction and force any pending transactions to execute in parallel. If they need to use that data, they gotta wait. They gotta sync between themselves. And so,
Okay, wait. Is that the solution or what?
yeah, so the first transaction basically takes precedence.
Okay, well
It
then
says-
the question is, how were they triggered? Of course, one after another, you would process them. That's how you
No,
do it
they're all
serially.
triggered in parallel.
Then how do you decide which is first?
But the very first transaction in the parallel scheme to grab a row and lock it forces the other ones to be pending for that row, and just wait until until the lock is released.
So by lock, in this scenario,
I can't
you
touch
mean,
this. I gotta wait and
but,
pull.
Okay, so this action, this message, is generated in a broadcast sense to everybody, anybody who will listen. So you generate it. You're just waiting around for somebody.
You modify
somebody to hear you saying, "Oh yeah, by the way, a minute ago I locked this file. Did
you
you know that?
you-
Oh well, you locked it 10 seconds ago. Sorry about that," or whatever. Or what if?
So you will have
You-
so it will be an update to the RAM database of saying what the locks are. So the next time anybody accesses the RAM database to try and
There's
modify
trust
data,
in that. There's trust in that too.
oh, this is
Because you could just say, "Oh, I locked it like 2 days ago." It's
no
been
no
locked,
oh yeah
buddy.
yeah.
I got this thing on lockdown.
Locking and unlocking is an actual protocol, so it's not an unsolved problem. It's like what databases do. I'm just trying to copy it into Redux.
Yeah, like just the idea of locking when you're in an asynchronous environment.
Locking doesn't mean fail in everything else past it. It means that it waits. And once the lock is released, it continues.
Okay, but it seems like it comes down to timing, because you want to know who locked something first.
Yeah, the operating system is the only thing that can determine that.
But then there's
that's
like
multiple.
it feels like needs to be trust and the web of trust kind of ideas
yeah.
are kind of flashing to me right
This
now.
is this is
Because how do you even trust someone to say when they locked it or negotiate? Like who has power over the writing of that file?
we create locks based
It
on,
could
based
be
on
on
sequence.
based on coherence.
No, it's based on sequence. Locking just means we can't have inconsistent data.
And yeah, again, you're,
It's not
you're
talking
talking
about
about
coherence.
the pouch DB probably.
Redux at this point. You lock your Redux in
Locking, okay.
RAM rows, so it has to be the same client.
But I guess it has to come down to spread on the network. the fact of that lock existing, which is where it,
You can't rely on that to be possible. If you have an update coming from the system, what it will do is it will overwrite what you have in RAM. So by the time you get to that row and lock it, you get that version, you
Right.
copy that version, you work with that version, and whatever the fuck
Yeah.
happens over
you
here.
promise to update that when you're when you close this file. That's what you're saying.
Yeah,
with the
like
lock.
you always work with your local data. You say things like,
Again,
okay.
like this kind of actually excites me in a way, like the logistics of user interface and like how you would program these things to happen in a real life scenario, right?
Yeah, the other tools I've been mentioning like Tailwind, Aria.
We didn't bring those up or how they're related.
No, but we've talked about them in our chats.
Is it more UI side?
Yeah. It's when you take the idea of your button element, and then you imbue it with all of this accessibility stuff. So like a screen reader will like look through
Yeah.
your screen and be like, to a blind person,
Mhm.
describe exactly what the fuck
And
is happening.
This is related to what I feel like is on your intention, like a developer tool in which your user interfaces are like almost automatically generated based on the content of
Yeah.
what you're feeding up to that UI. So you as a user interface developer hardly even would need to think about at all
Exactly. You just utilize a little
the data and it's div organization and how
Mhm.
that data just is structured.
Yeah, to put it into a naive sort of perspective, it's like all of those components that I've been talking about are like those templates of fully structured, utilizable markup that you can just plug into your interface and just go from there, and it just knows what
Mhm.
the fuck to do.
Yeah.
And
well,
the data feeds its purpose. The data feeds its accessibility. The data feeds its positionality in the layout. Any one of those things.
Yeah, man. I think that's the point all across the stack, up and down, top to bottom, make things easier. It's all, there's an archetypal structure of organization to a holonic method, right? You have the same thing happening layer to layer. You're seeing reflections, which the small looks like the big, like, yes, I have to organize myself as well as my community, etc. She's empty.
Yeah, I can't cheers. Last one?
Nope. Ah, there we go.
Yeah, not only that, but a very useful analogy to the body. And that is something I did not plan for today. I think it's actually pretty fucking cool that we can say Redux is like the central nervous system. We have a
Mhm.
tactile nervous system.
You were kind of
which-
alluding to it, but we've kind of fleshed it out, I guess.
I never thought about it this way until like maybe a day ago, 2 days ago. Just fucking around with shit.
Mm-hmm.
It just occurs.
Yeah, you
to
kept
me.
asking, like, is the body like a good metaphor? Like,
Yeah.
obviously.
Well,
Duh.
I mean, I'm not. I don't want to be. I don't want to be that presumptuous.
Yep.
So-
it's always the go-to metaphor, the body itself. Jeez.
But like an actual useful metaphor with the body. So like,
To describe the dashboard and its stack of technology.
yeah, like Redux being the central spinal cord nervous system that they just like is a dumb nervous system but smart nervous system in that it's a reflective of the. It's
Yeah.
it's an automated reflection of the environment
what it's
for
pre-
which
what
for
it's
which it
presenting
evolved into.
what it's presenting.
So even grasping
what it's presenting is regular to the universe.
right, and then there's the brain, which is like it takes bits and pieces out of the tactile system and just like creates pictures of shit for itself, only to send a minimum amount of information of reaction to all of that ideology, like whatever the fuck it created. It's just like, okay, the grand idea is here, but the basics get sent back down. So it's like, so Redux becomes this medium of the entire system, right? And it sends off things into persistence and gets back shit back out of it,
Mm-hmm.
and all of that stuff.
Right. It kind of seems like Pouch is, like that's a very intuitive language at Redux, the level, that layer, for people
Mhm.
to talk about things, systems existing and communicating. Pouch is a little bit technical in that
Pouch is like
You're
a
having-
psychedelic fucking
you're having the
layer.
ability to just grab that whole world into your own possession, in data possession, essentially, and have it localized. Whatever is out there is now here. You just
Ye-
press a button, right? And that's huge.
Yeah. The way I use Pouch right now, check this out. You create a memory pouch, so it only exists for the duration of the execution of the actual thing. So
Well-
it grabs all the Redux stuff from RAM and puts it right back into
If we're relying on
RAM.
this,
You know what I mean? Like making it very ephemeral.
like I'm imagining just a scrap notepad.
Yeah.
Any workstation, any good workstation has a notepad, a pen. You write something on your mind, and then
so
leave it, come
Pou-
back to it.
Pouch is this CRUD. CRUD is create, read, update, delete.
I don't know where that thing is related to.
Create a message.
Yeah,
Get-
it's a database interface. Right?
Read a message.
Read or update
Update
and delete.
message. Delete message. That's the API. 1, 2, 3, 4. Create, read, update, delete.
But if we're honest, can you ever truly delete anything?
Delete doesn't mean delete doesn't not mean remove from data set.
That's what I figured. Like just
Delete
it's
is
gone.
it's a concept. Delete means it no longer presents
from the
itself.
interface.
When you say get again, it does not
Include
appear.
things that have been deleted.
Yeah, it makes no sense
So-
to do that.
You're not saying, "Oh, it's gone now." Truly,
Yeah,
'cause
delete is
nothing ever is.
delete is a concept. So is
Right.
create.
Burp. Pardon? Because what has already been created. Think about that.
Yeah, delete means you set the attribute of underscore deleted to true in the document. In its very latest version. Scroll back a version, it might not be deleted.
Sure. Yeah.
So
Sounds good. Seems regular. I'm not versed on all the specifics. But,
yeah. Don't do
Once again, actually, we're about 3 minutes away from closing down the session and packing her up, boys.
Yeah, delete is a concept. So is
I feel
update,
like
so is everything.
Today we managed to, and I'm glad that Eon was here for like half of it. Probably like he'd stuck around for
Thank
a
you.
good bit.
Thank you.
Yeah, shout outs and props to Eon for this session, but he really helped us refine and stay on topic,
Oh.
and just know that at least me, that someone's watching right now. You know, you
No,
kind of check
you-
in, you lean in. You know, you have a different conversation.
You
It's
filtered
like-
me through Eon, which is nice.
It's more people. People are good.
Which is nice. So yeah, can I like close this
Final
with,
moments or anything? Yeah.
with like a dev talk, but also like a
Just keep doing what's on your mind.
On my mind is developer experience.
Paramount.
I do not want anybody jumping into this project feeling like, oh fuck.
It's too many things.
Yeah.
There should be this is a coherence, and the participant has to be presented with something that will interface with them. Meet people where they are. Meet people where they are.
So
If that wasn't clear.
So, with all of the different complex layers that have been laid out here, right, it's very important that I convey that the developer experience isn't actually changing into a more complicated way of reasoning about anything. The reason being is that the systems that I'm choosing over and over and over again, Redux,
That's all.
XState.
That's back end things as far as most people are concerned.
So like, and React is the whole pure function arc, the theme of the what parameters go into a function.
You must be talking
drive.
about complex adaptive systems and
Mm-mm.
grammatical capacities.
No.
And here
Not.
No, I mean like what it's I think hinging on is the fact that you need to create layer after layer. You're creating archetypes which go up to create new potentialities and archetypes. There's a regularity to the model.
That speaks to why there are so many different layers. Yes.
To me, it feels like that's like a core thing that keeps driving. The main constraint of it is that whatever you're building has to be looking like this.
Sure.
It just always looks the same,
Sure.
right? Not sure. That's what it is, man.
It's not the angle that I'm going at. What I'm trying to refer to is that.
That's my point, anyways.
Yes. No. It's valid. The point I'm referring to is more to the fact that all of the actual coding asks, like if you were to like be the programmer on dashboard,
You're trying to justify
there-
why these packages, like we've just brought up, PouchDB, Redux, Refine, XState, and related them to the model, this body metaphor. Beautiful, man. It's been quite a freaking session, I'll say.
More to my point though is that pure function style.
Regularity. Do I
I-
harp on
if-
regularity?
If you
Oh, man.
understand pure functions here,
Because you know what's going to come
apply
out.
it there. You can
just
apply
know what
it
it's
there.
going to do. That's what you're talking about, right?
Every one of these layers
There's a
uses pure functions
very
to express
high
the next
like
point.
conservativeness to that,
Yeah,
which is interesting.
so it's like mapping.
Yeah.
Very predictable.
Right.
All you do is optimize.
Man, I'm glad we're friends.
That's like the real key to the architecture is that you never step outside the world of pure functions. You just code, I have my inputs, what do my outputs need to be? You're already confident and you're tackling this problem, so you want to.
You're on the ground.
Yeah, so
You've already seen it fail 1,000 times.
Yeah,
Now
you know.
you just want to be able to describe it through an app that other people can also be part of.
Or not an app, a function. You
But
take
index
per-
cards
you
or
take
whatever. We're
parameter-
talking
no.
facilitation. I'm talking about the role of facilitation. Embodies this.
Yeah, I'm facilitating a way in which every single programmer will write only functions that take in parameters, one by one, and conclude what the output of the calculation might be.
And
Done.
This is the
Done.
the refine pipeline where you make chunks of reality, sort of.
Yeah, and then translate between them over and over and over again.
right? Be able to reference by name other chunks of reality and how they work, and how they should connect, or it's opening up a competition, if you will, of code.
Here's where it gets really kind of giddy. Whether it's in the app, on your native client, or whether it's on the server responding to a request, what will happen is that you'll get an entire network of quote-unquote actors initiated, told to have a conversation, and will be asked to give its feedback.
You're talking about
Back to the system.
simulating the guild? I think like spinning up a simulation of what's happening.
So internally, like even in the conversation agent engine, it will have like a simulation of an agent, the dashboard itself, the feed,
Of course.
and
yeah.
the conversation in which it's
Mhm.
participating as one unified element to which it sends messages. So so the
Mhm.
brain element is going to capture actually all that, and the only thing it's going to do back is like, yeah, that worked. Save.
So, is this a case of, like, ontologically speaking, an overall picture? You have the brain on the top, and then Pinky is like the body.
Multiple brains.
You have Pinky and the brain.
No, I wish it was. I really do
I'm
wish
just
it was.
joking. It sounded.
No,
seemed
it's
funny.
clever. You'd have like
What are we gonna do tonight, boss?
It's like you have this central nervous system, and you have your brain itself as the
Yeah.
the nerves themselves.
Your cringes at the market of Pinky and the brain. But
No.
This is more an emergence of just brain being dependent or on the body's functionality. That's from which it emerges, and it operates in its own context.
If you have one brain, you have multiple minds. Being X.
Sure.
So the brain will be like the code in X state, while the mind is all the different elements that pop up locally to themselves, trying to do their own calculations, feeding
Mhm.
back into the central system,
Right.
who has
And again,
feedback for all
this
of
is
those
like
individual calculations back.
normal mode of the cognitive alignment window, as opposed to debug. In normal mode, you have all these multiplexes of normality,
A debug
programs being run.
A debug version would have the entire central nervous system as the model that's copied
Right.
into the brain.
Yeah.
The X state thing that it works
So
holistically on.
It's when you have a model of the self itself being shunted into that matrix.
Yeah. So having the entire Redux store being represented in X
Right.
state.
What is a Redux store? How does it work?
How to manipulate it.
Etc. Right. Being upfront cognized.
A frontline tool to actually
Right? Yeah,
modify it.
Tools, good. But anyways, yeah, we're right about at that time. Actually, we're running.
Do you know what you just
running late.
do you know what you just realized that I didn't?
What?
Is that we're going to push the entire operations of the Redux store into X state. So
course,
that
yeah.
it too
Operations,
can manipulate it
yes.
on the whole.
The Redux store itself can be represented through refine, but the state
Both.
the state of the machine, of course, one and the other. The machine running is the X state land.
With
How is Redux running? How is PouchDB running? The idea of it going on as a process, ongoing, being mapped. And yeah, so that's where we are right now. Like we could keep recording for another hour plus without running over the
No,
the
just-
arbitrary
I'm just gonna smoke and we're out.
4 hour kind of limit with the. It was actually a third party site, which I ended up purchasing a subscription to, so they no longer have limits like 4 hours, so it doesn't matter. But that's a thing of the past, and right now you do have to be home. So
Yeah.
I'm gonna say I'm gonna call it right now because we gotta pack up. You can smoke your cigarette, but
So, in conclusion, we have a very
I'll give a
solid
final minute.
We have a stack, the tech stack that we're
It's a
very
great
settled
meeting.
on.
Yeah, good meeting.
PouchDB.
Tech stack has only just now, it seems like, come together and pretty much settled.
PouchDB to give the ephemerality to the persistent data.
So
It's up to whatever you configure your
guess
pouch. to
anybody
be.
trying to understand how this stack works could look up on their own through Wikipedia.
Oh,
What
you
is-
have to.
What is PouchDB? How
Yeah,
does
you
it
have
work?
to.
What does it do? How did it connect?
Yeah.
And you'll
To
see how
understand.
we connect with Redux being something at a higher layer, emerging at a new language layer above that.
To do
And
that,
then above that, we've got the
for the technical
fork
people,
dichotomy,
for the technical people to do that,
abstract
you
and the
need to
concrete
understand RTK
of
query.
refine and X state.
Hold on. You need to-
Articulate query.
RTK query, Redux Toolkit query. It's the add-on to Redux
Query.
that allows it to sync up with some external database like Pouch.
Yeah.
So RTK
Okay.
query
That's weird.
is a mechanism
I
that
guess.
pulls and pushes data back and forth
So,
between it.
From its own package perspective,
It's still a Redux.
Redux wants to be able to connect to databases. This is one of the plugins that lets you do that.
The addition that I've made to it is that I'm pushing.
And
I'm
with
pu-
that,
I'm pushing it to the RAM space, so it doesn't just take that cache data from the databases. It actually lets you work with a source of truth in the time, which gets real-time updates from the database system. So you have a database.
I feel it would take
cache.
time to unpack
RAM.
that. But yes, yeah, the distinction between RAM and more pervasive media. What do you call it?
So you trigger changes in the RAM. It triggers changes in the persistence.
Persistent media.
And
That's
that
the one.
triggers changes in the cache, which triggers further changes back in the RAM, just in case shit changed between the initial request for change to
Right.
or you roll back if it doesn't work.
Mm-hmm. And this type of functionality is like the ability to change after the fact. This is like that kind of higher layer that we were talking about. We never considered back in the geotabs days, right? But what a meeting! Very satisfied, buddy. We actually nobody could barely see us. Doesn't matter how bad a hair day or what. But the day is pretty much over.
Yeah,
And
the
I
day is
gotta-
over. Pure functions for the win. Refine for the second win. Because refine is like a really cool way to bind all of that queries for data, like what data I want, coupled with can I have this
It
data?
reminds me of protocols.
Can I have
guess.
this data?
Like the user accessible.
Am I the one that is supposed to be receiving said data? If I'm this user, which subset of data should I be receiving?
Yeah. So you have to process your environment. That's up to the individual. And this is like your protocols. This is your model, isn't it?
Yeah.
The central, like the
Well,
middle,
the database
the
doesn't
mid,
provide
the
that.
abstract, if you will.
So the database in RAM
The
does not
ability
provide
to talk and read in abstract.
it. Yeah, but the
Right?
data.
Okay. With that, buddies, we're out.
Okay, well,
We're out, bud.
yeah.
Yep. That's
Yeah.
it.